Hey, still wide awake? I know the feeling, lying there wishing your mind had an off switch. So let me take over for a bit. 5 calm stories, told slowly, with the rain settling in around us. You don't need to do anything but listen and let the edges of the day fade out. Story 1. I found scratches on my bedroom floor I didn't make. So, this happened about 2 years ago, right after I turned 24. I'd just ended a 3-year relationship, not dramatically, not with screaming or thrown plates, just this slow, exhausted realization that we'd become strangers, sharing a bed. When he moved out, I told myself I needed a fresh start, somewhere that was just mine, somewhere I could figure out who I was when I wasn't someone's girlfriend. I found the house on Craigslist, which I know sounds like the beginning of a horror movie. 1 bedroom, hardwood floors, quiet neighborhood. The rent was cheap, suspiciously cheap looking back, but I convinced myself I'd just gotten lucky. The landlord was this older guy named Phil, who seemed nice enough, a little scattered. He showed me around on a Tuesday afternoon, and I remember thinking how perfect it felt. Small, but not cramped. Old, but charming. The kind of place that had character. The first thing I noticed was the floors, beautiful original hardwood, scratched and worn in that way that tells you a house has been lived in, has stories. The bedroom was at the back of the house, tucked away, private. It had this big closet that went back further than I expected, deep enough that I couldn't see the back wall without turning on the light. I figured I'd finally have enough space for all my clothes. I moved in on a rainy Saturday in October. My friend Jenna helped me carry boxes, and by nightfall, I had the essentials set up: bed, couch, coffee maker. The important things. That first night, I lay in bed listening to the rain tap against the old single-pane windows, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The house settled around me with soft creaks and sighs, and I thought, this is it. This is where I start over. My cat Miso curled up at my feet like he'd always lived there. He's this gray tabby I'd had since college. 4 years of him following me from apartment to apartment, always adjusting, always finding his spot. That first week, he explored every corner of the house with that intense feline focus, sniffing baseboards and claiming windowsills. He seemed happy. I was happy. I work remotely as a graphic designer, which meant I could keep my weird hours without anyone caring. I'd stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning, laptop balanced on my knees in bed, Miso purring beside me, rain drumming softly on the roof. It became my routine. Tea, work, the glow of my screen in the dark, the steady rhythm of weather outside. Peaceful. Safe. The neighborhood helped with that feeling. It was quiet, mostly older residents, retirees who waved when I checked the mail but didn't try to make conversation. Everyone kept to themselves. After the breakup, after months of navigating someone else's moods and needs, I wanted that solitude. I craved it. I didn't know any of my neighbors' names. Didn't have a security system. Phil said the area was safe, had been for decades. The house was set back from the street, hedges blocking the view from the sidewalk, which I'd thought was a good thing. Privacy. Now I think about how no one could see my front door. No one could see my windows. Those first few weeks were good, really good. I started sleeping through the night again, something I hadn't done in months. Miso settled into his routines. Breakfast at 7, afternoon nap in the sunny spot by the living room window, bedtime cuddles. I'd call my mom every few days and she'd say I sounded better, lighter. She was right. Phil stopped by once to fix a leaky faucet, and while he was there, I asked about the previous tenant. Just curious, making conversation. He got this weird look on his face, just for a second, then shrugged. She left kind of suddenly, he said. Didn't give much notice. Some people just aren't meant for living alone, I guess. I didn't think much of it at the time. People leave apartments all the time. Life happens. About 6 weeks after I moved in, I noticed something strange. I'd dropped my phone off the side of the bed and was reaching down to grab it when I saw them. 3 long scratches in the hardwood floor, right next to my bed. Deep gouges, maybe 8 inches long, running parallel to each other. They were close, 6 inches from where my hand would hang if I reached down in the night. I crouched on the floor, running my fingers over them. The wood inside the grooves was lighter than the rest of the floor, almost fresh-looking. I tried to remember if they'd been there when I moved in. I'd looked at these floors 100 times, swept them, walked across them barefoot, dropped things on them. How had I not noticed? I sat back on my heels, frowning. Maybe they'd always been there and I just hadn't paid attention. Maybe the previous tenant had moved furniture and scraped the floor. Maybe 100 things. But they looked deliberate, even, almost like something had been dragged. I took a photo with my phone, zoomed in, studied it, told myself I was being ridiculous. Old house, old floors. Things get scratched. It's not a mystery, it's just wear and tear. That night, I pushed the thought out of my head and went to sleep like normal. Rain on the windows, miso at my feet, the familiar comfort of my new routine. But right before I drifted off, I thought about those scratches again. How clean the lines were, how even. I told myself they must have always been there. I just hadn't noticed. That's what I kept telling myself. The next morning, I got down on my hands and knees and really looked at those scratches. Sunlight was streaming through the window, and in that light, I could see details I'd missed the night before. The wood inside the grooves wasn't just lighter, it was almost white, fresh. Like whatever made them had cut through the aged patina of the floor to the raw wood beneath. I ran my fingernail along one of the grooves, tiny splinters caught on my skin. These weren't old scratches that I'd somehow overlooked for 6 weeks. They were new, or at least newer than everything else. I sat back and stared at them, trying to come up with an explanation. Miso's claws. No, he was declawed when I adopted him, a decision made by his previous owner that I'd always felt guilty about. Moving furniture. I hadn't touched anything near that spot. The bed frame had rubber feet specifically to protect the floors. Maybe they'd been there all along, I told myself again. Maybe the light just hadn't hit them right before. I took another photo, compared it to the one from last night. They looked the same. Of course they did. I went back to work and tried to forget about it, but Miso wouldn't let me forget. Over the next few days, he started acting strange. He'd always been a curious cat, the kind who investigated every sound and shadow, but now he seemed fixated on the bedroom closet. I'd find him sitting in the hallway, just staring at the closed door with his ears flat against his head. When I'd call his name, he wouldn't look at me, just kept staring. One night, it must have been 4 or 5 days after I found the scratches, I woke up to a sound I'd never heard him make. This low, rumbling growl, almost like a dog. My eyes snapped open, heart already pounding. Miso was at the foot of the bed, back arched, hackles raised, staring at the closet door. "Miso," I whispered. "What is it?" He didn't move, just kept growling, this sustained, guttural sound that raised every hair on my arms. I made myself get up, made myself walk to the closet, hand trembling as I reached for the handle. Pulled it open. Nothing, just my clothes hanging in the darkness, the faint smell of cedar from the shoe organizer I'd hung on the back of the door. I turned on the closet light, pushed the hangers aside, looked into the deep back corner where the shadows pooled. Empty. Outside, rain had started falling, drumming steadily on the roof. I focused on that sound, let it calm my racing heart. Miso had probably heard a mouse in the walls. Old houses have mice. It's normal. Everything was normal. I closed the closet door and went back to bed. Didn't sleep for hours. The next morning, I woke up and something felt wrong before I even opened my eyes. I lay there, trying to identify what had changed, and then I saw it. My bedroom door was open, just a few inches, but enough. I always close my door at night, always. It's a habit from childhood. My mom used to say closed doors slow down fires. I'd closed it the night before. I remembered doing it, remembered the click of the latch, but there it was, open. I stared at that gap for a long time, trying to convince myself I'd gotten up in the night and forgotten. Maybe I'd gone to the bathroom. Maybe I'd checked on something and just not closed it all the way. But I knew I hadn't. I knew. I started second-guessing everything after that. Every little thing that seemed off, I'd explain away, then lie awake, wondering if I was wrong. A kitchen drawer I always kept closed was cracked open an inch. My laptop had moved slightly from where I'd left it on the coffee table. A towel in the bathroom hung differently on the rack. Each thing alone was nothing, less than nothing. The kind of thing you wouldn't even notice if you weren't looking for it. I was looking for it. I mentioned it to my mom during one of our calls, keeping my voice light. I think living alone is making me paranoid, I laughed. I keep thinking things are moving around. Old houses settle, she said. You're just adjusting. It's normal to feel a little jumpy at first. She was probably right. I wanted her to be right. Then I found the muddy smudge by the back door. It had been raining on and off all week, nothing unusual for October. I could have tracked it in myself. But the smudge was too far from the doormat, and the shape was wrong. Elongated, almost like the front half of a footprint. Bigger than my foot, bigger than any shoe I owned. I cleaned it up without letting myself think about what it might mean. Scrubbed the floor until the wood was spotless, then washed my hands twice. That night, I found another scratch on the bedroom floor. This one was near the closet door. I crouched there, heart hammering, and looked at it. Fresh. I could see tiny curls of wood still clinging to the edges of the groove, like it had just been made. Like something had been dragged across the floor toward the closet, or out of it. Miso wouldn't come into the bedroom anymore. He slept on the couch, and when I carried him to the bed, he'd squirm out of my arms and bolt for the living room. My cat, who had slept at my feet every night for 4 years, wouldn't stay in the same room with me after dark. I told myself I was being crazy. Told myself there was an explanation. Told myself everything was fine. But that night, before I went to bed, I pushed my dresser in front of the closet door. It took all my strength to move it, and I stood there afterward, breathing hard, feeling ridiculous and terrified in equal measure. I slept with the lights on. Woke up at 3 a.m. with my heart pounding and no idea why. The dresser was still in place. The door was still closed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something I couldn't see, couldn't prove, couldn't explain. The next day, I set up my laptop on top of the dresser, camera facing the bed and the closet door. Hit record before I turned off the lights. If something was happening in my room at night, I was going to find out what it was. The first night, I watched 8 hours of footage on fast forward. Nothing. Just me sleeping, shifting occasionally, the room unchanging. The closet door stayed shut. The dresser didn't move. I felt relieved and embarrassed in equal measure. Maybe I really was just paranoid. Maybe living alone had gotten into my head. The second night, same thing. Hours of nothing. Me sleeping. Rain streaking the window. Shadows from passing cars sliding across the ceiling. I laughed at myself a little, watching the footage. All that fear over nothing. I almost didn't check the third night. It was a Saturday morning. I'd slept in, made coffee, sat down at my desk with my laptop open and the footage file ready. I wasn't even really paying attention, just scrubbing through the timeline, watching the hours tick by in fast motion. 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m., me, asleep, nothing happening. 2 a.m., 2:30, 3. I almost missed it. At 3:41 a.m., something moved at the edge of the frame. I stopped, rewound, leaned closer to the screen. The closet door. It was opening. Slowly, so slowly, just inches at a time, like whoever was behind it was being careful, patient, like they'd done this before. My coffee went cold in my hands. I didn't notice, couldn't look away. The door opened wider. A foot, then more, and then he stepped out. A man, a person, a living, breathing human being stepping out of my closet at 3:41 in the morning while I slept 6 feet away. I stopped breathing. I think my heart stopped too. He was wearing dark clothes, a hoodie with the hood up, dark pants. I couldn't see his face clearly, just the shape of him in the dim light from the window. He moved carefully, deliberately, stepping around the dresser I'd pushed against the door. He knew it was there. He'd planned for it. He walked to my bed, and he stood there. I watched myself sleeping, watched my chest rise and fall, oblivious, peaceful. Watched this stranger standing over me, looking down at me, close enough to touch me if he reached out his hand. He didn't reach out. He just stood there, watching. I wanted to look away, wanted to stop the video, throw my laptop across the room, pretend I'd never seen it. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but watch. On the screen, the timestamp ticked forward, 3:42, 3:43, 3:44. He stood there for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I know because I counted. Every second of him standing over my sleeping body, I counted. Then he crouched down, near the floor, near the scratches. He was doing something. I couldn't see what. The angle was wrong, his body blocking the view. But he was down there by my bed, by those gouges in the hardwood, and he was doing something. After maybe 30 seconds, he stood back up, looked at me one more time. Then he walked back to the closet, stepped inside, and pulled the door closed behind him. The footage kept running. Me sleeping. The room empty. Like nothing had happened at all. I sat there for a long time. I don't know how long. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone when I finally picked it up. My vision had gone strange, tunneled, fuzzy at the edges. I thought I might throw up. I thought I might pass out. I thought I might be dreaming, because this couldn't be real. This couldn't actually be happening. But it was real. The video was real. He was real. Someone had been coming into my room while I slept. Someone had been standing over my bed, watching me, doing something on the floor beside me. And I'd had no idea. I'd slept through it. I'd slept through all of it. I called 911. My voice didn't sound like my own when I spoke. "Someone's been in my house," I said. "Someone's been coming into my bedroom while I sleep. I have it on video. I have proof." The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. She asked questions I barely heard. I answered on autopilot. Yes, I was safe. No, I didn't think he was in the house right now. Yes, I would stay on the line. I grabbed Miso from the couch. He yowled in protest, but I didn't care. Grabbed my keys and my phone, and I went outside. Got in my car, locked the doors. I sat there in my driveway, engine off, watching my own house through the rain-streaked windshield. The windows were dark. The front door was closed. Everything looked normal, peaceful. The same house I'd fallen in love with 2 months ago. But now I knew what was inside, what had been inside maybe, the whole time I'd lived there. I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop seeing it, the closet door opening, the dark shape stepping out, the way he'd stood over me for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. What had he been doing? What had he been thinking? Had he touched me? Had he done this before? How many nights had he been there while I slept? The police arrived 12 minutes later. I watched their lights paint my house in red and blue, watched them approach my front door with flashlights drawn, and I thought about every night I'd spent in that bedroom. Every night I'd fallen asleep to the sound of rain, feeling safe. feeling peaceful. I'd never felt safe again. The officers were careful with me, professional. One of them, a woman with kind eyes and a calm voice, stayed by my car while the others went inside. She asked if I was okay. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. "We're going to check the house," she said. "All of it. You don't have to go back in there." I showed her the video on my phone, watched her face as she watched it, saw the moment her expression shifted from professional neutrality to something else, something that told me this was bad. This was really bad. She called the others on her radio. More officers arrived. I lost count of how many. From my car, I watched flashlight beams move through my windows, cutting through the darkness of my bedroom, my living room, my kitchen, searching. I held miso against my chest and tried to stop shaking. The rain had picked up, hammering against the roof of my car, streaming down the windshield in thick sheets. I couldn't see much anymore, just shapes, shadows, the occasional silhouette passing in front of a window. After what felt like hours, probably 20 minutes, one of the officers came back outside. He walked to my car and I rolled down the window. Rain misted against my face. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was strange, tight. "We found something. You don't have to see it, but we need you to know what we're dealing with." I got out of the car. I don't know why. I should have stayed where I was, let them handle it, never set foot in that house again. But I needed to know. I needed to see. The officer led me to the front door. I stopped at the threshold, couldn't make myself cross it. From there, I could see into the bedroom. The closet door was open, light spilling out from inside. Officers were crouched around something, talking in low voices. "In the back of the closet," the officer said, "there's a panel. It was made to look like part of the wall, but it comes off. Behind it, there's a crawl space." A crawl space in my closet. Behind my clothes, behind the cedar shoe organizer, behind everything I'd touched and moved and never thought twice about. "Someone's been living in there," he said. The words didn't make sense at first. Living, in my walls, in the space behind my closet while I slept 10 feet away. "We found a sleeping bag," he continued. "Water bottles, food wrappers. Looks like he's been there a while." I leaned against the doorframe. My legs had stopped working properly. The officer put a hand on my arm to steady me. "There's more," he said. And the way he said it, I knew whatever came next would be worse. He led me closer. Not into the bedroom, but close enough to see. Close enough to see the officer in the closet holding up a plastic bag full of photographs. Photographs of me, through my windows, at my laptop, in my kitchen, making coffee, sleeping. Dozens of photos of me sleeping, taken from angles that could only have come from inside the room, from right next to my bed. Close-ups of my face, my hands, my hair spread across the pillow. I made a sound, I don't know what kind, something between a gasp and a scream that got stuck in my throat. One of the officers stepped in front of me, blocking my view. "You don't need to see anymore," she said, the kind one from before. "We've got it from here." But I'd already seen enough. I'd seen enough to understand. He hadn't just been entering my house. He'd been documenting me, studying me, collecting me like I was something to be cataloged and kept. "How long?" I heard myself ask. "How long has he been doing this?" The officer hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "Some of the photos," she said carefully, "aren't of you." It took me a moment to understand what she meant. Then it hit me like a physical blow. The previous tenant. The woman who'd left suddenly. Who Phil said wasn't meant for living alone. She hadn't left because she couldn't handle the solitude. She'd left because she'd known. Somehow she'd known something was wrong. She'd felt it the way I'd felt it. That constant creeping sense of being watched, And she'd gotten out before she found out the truth. Or maybe she'd found out. Maybe that's why she ran. He was watching her too, I whispered, before me. He's been here the whole time. The officer didn't confirm it. She didn't have to. I thought about the scratches on my floor, the drag marks near my bed, near the closet. He'd been pulling his supplies in and out. Water and food and whatever else he needed to survive in that dark space behind my wall. He'd been doing it for months, maybe longer. I thought about every night I'd slept in that room. Every night I'd felt safe and peaceful with the rain on the windows and miso at my feet. Every night he'd been feet away from me, separated by nothing but a thin panel of drywall, waiting until I fell asleep so he could come out and stand over me in the dark. The officers kept talking, asking questions, explaining next steps. I heard almost none of it. I kept thinking about one thing the first officer had said. He could have been there tonight, he'd told his partner when they first found the crawl space. If she hadn't checked that footage this morning. He hadn't finished the sentence. He didn't need to. I never went back to that house alone. Jenna came with me 2 days later to pack up my things. I couldn't go into the bedroom, couldn't even look at the closet door. She did it for me, grabbed my clothes off the hangers, stuffed them into garbage bags without folding them, worked quickly like she understood that every second we spent in that house was a second too long. I stood in the living room, holding miso, staring at the walls, wondering if there were other spaces I didn't know about. Other panels that looked like they belonged but didn't. Other places where someone could hide and watch and wait. We were out in under an hour. I left most of my furniture behind. Didn't want it anymore. Didn't want anything that had been in that house. Anything he might have touched or looked at or photographed. I stayed with my mom for 3 weeks. She didn't ask many questions. I think the look on my face told her everything she needed to know. I slept in my childhood bedroom with the door locked and a chair wedged under the handle. Even then, I woke up every few hours, heart pounding, certain I'd heard something. Certain he'd found me. The police investigated. They processed the crawl space, dusted for fingerprints, collected DNA samples from the sleeping bag and the water bottles. They interviewed Phil, interviewed the neighbors, canvassed the area for anyone who might have seen something. They found nothing useful. No fingerprints in any database, no DNA match, no witnesses who remembered seeing anyone suspicious around the property. The previous tenant, the woman in the other photos, had moved out of state and changed her number. They couldn't reach her. I don't blame her for disappearing. I understood the impulse. Phil called me once, about a week after it happened. He sounded shaken, guilty. She told me, he said, the woman before you. She said she felt like someone was watching her, said she heard noises at night, felt like things were being moved. I thought she was just, I don't know, nervous, paranoid. He'd dismissed her, thought she couldn't handle living alone. Let her break her lease early and never asked why she was so desperate to leave. I should have listened, he said. I should have checked. I'm so sorry. I hung up without responding. I didn't have words for him, didn't have anything left. The man was never identified, never caught. The case went cold within a few months. No new leads, no new evidence, nothing to follow. The detective who'd been assigned to my case called me every few weeks at first, then every few months, then stopped calling altogether. There was nothing to say. Sometimes I think about him. The man in the dark clothes who stood over my bed for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I wonder where he went after the police searched the house. I wonder if he watched from somewhere nearby while the sirens lit up the street. I wonder if he was angry that I'd found him out, or if he'd just moved on to someone else. Some other woman in some other house with a closet that goes back too far. I wonder if she's noticed the scratches yet. I live in a secured apartment building now. 3rd floor, no ground level access, no crawl spaces, no closets deeper than 3 feet. I had the building manager show me the blueprints before I signed the lease. Made him open every panel, every access point, every space where a person could theoretically hide. He looked at me like I was crazy. I didn't care. I sleep with a camera running every night. The red recording light blinks in the darkness, and sometimes I lie there watching it, letting it remind me that I'll know. If something happens, I'll know. I check my closets before bed. Every closet, every door, every space large enough to hold a person. I check them twice, sometimes 3 times. My therapist says it's a trauma response, that eventually I might not need to do it anymore. I don't believe her. I think I'll be checking closets for the rest of my life. Miso sleeps on my pillow now, right next to my head. I don't push him away. He knew before I did, sensed something wrong when I was still telling myself everything was fine. If he ever stares at a door like that again, ears flat, hackles raised, I won't dismiss it. I won't tell myself it's just a mouse in the walls. I'll listen. I'll trust him. I'll trust myself. I still have the video file. It's backed up in 3 different places: my laptop, an external hard drive, the cloud. I've never watched it again after showing the police. Don't need to. Every frame is burned into my memory. The closet door opening, the dark shape stepping out. The 4 minutes and 17 seconds he stood over me while I slept. Sometimes I wake up at exactly 3:41 a.m. No alarm, no noise, nothing to explain it. My body just knows, remembers, pulls me out of sleep at the exact moment he used to emerge from the darkness. Those scratches saved my life. 3 gouges in old hardwood that I almost ignored, almost convinced myself were nothing, almost explained away like everything else. If I hadn't noticed them, if I hadn't let myself believe that something was wrong, I don't know how this story would have ended. I don't know what he wanted. I don't know what he was building toward, what he was waiting for, what he would have done if I'd never found out. I try not to think about it. Thinking about it doesn't help. But I think about this. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong in your home, if something feels off in a way you can't explain, please, don't dismiss it. Don't rationalize. Don't tell yourself you're being paranoid. Check your closets. You might not be alone. Story 2. My smart lights turned red at 3:12 a.m. I need to tell you about the night I realized someone had been living inside my apartment for months without ever stepping foot inside it. I'm a software developer, 28 years old, work from home, the whole stereotypical setup. Dual monitors, mechanical keyboard, way too many energy drinks in my mini fridge. I moved into my apartment in September, right after my engagement fell apart. Nice place in a decent building, 12th floor, big windows overlooking the city. It felt like a fresh start. Felt like the kind of place where I could rebuild myself into whoever I was supposed to be next. The first thing I did after unpacking was set up my smart home system. I know how that sounds now, but you have to understand. I'm a tech guy. I live and breathe this stuff. Smart lights in every room, color-changing LEDs that I could control from my phone, a smart thermostat that learned my schedule, smart locks on the front door so I'd never have to fumble for keys, a voice assistant in the living room and one in the bedroom, security cameras at the entrance and in the hallway. I thought I was being safe. I thought all those cameras and sensors meant I'd always know what was happening in my own home. I was so stupid. Those first few months were good. I settled into a routine. Wake up around 9, coffee, work until 6 or 7, then video games or coding personal projects until 2 or 3 in the morning. The smart lights were set to shift automatically throughout the day. Bright white in the morning to wake me up. Warm amber in the evenings to help me wind down, then a soft, dim glow when it got late. I loved it. Loved feeling like my apartment was this responsive, intelligent space that adapted to my life. Winter came early that year. By November, it was dark by 5 o'clock. and I'd go days without leaving the apartment. Groceries delivered, food delivered, everything I needed just a click away. The silence of the place became familiar, comfortable. Just me and the soft hum of my computer fans, the occasional ping of a notification, the glow of my screens in the dark. I didn't talk to many people. My friends had mostly been our friends, mine and my ex's, and after the breakup, it was easier to just retreat. I told myself I was healing, taking time for myself. Really, I was hiding, but hiding felt safe, and safe was what I needed. The apartment helped with that. 12th floor meant no foot traffic outside my windows, no strangers walking past. The smart lock meant no one could get in without me knowing. The cameras meant I could check on things anytime, from anywhere. I had control, or I thought I did. It was a Tuesday night in late November when it first happened. I'd fallen asleep on the couch watching something on my laptop. I don't even remember what. Woke up disoriented, neck stiff, that groggy confusion of not knowing what time it was or how long I'd been out. The first thing I noticed was the light. Everything was red. Not the warm amber of my evening settings, not the soft white of my morning routine. Red, deep, saturated red, like the whole apartment had been dipped in blood. Every smart bulb in every room, all of them glowing that same unsettling crimson. I sat up, blinking, heart already beating faster than it should have been. Grabbed my phone off the coffee table to check the app. 3:12 a.m. I opened the smart home app, expecting to see some kind of scheduled scene I'd forgotten about. A setting I'd accidentally triggered. Something. Nothing. No scheduled changes. No recent commands. According to the app, the lights should have been off entirely, but they weren't off. They were red. I sat there in that red glow, looking around my apartment like I'd never seen it before. The familiar shapes of my furniture looked wrong in that light. Threatening. Shadows pooled in corners I'd never noticed. I told myself it was a glitch. Software bug. Maybe an update had pushed through and messed with my settings. It happens. I work in tech. I know how often things just break for no reason. I reset the lights from the app. They flickered once, twice, then returned to normal. Off, the way they should have been at 3 a.m. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Okay, I said out loud, just to hear something other than the silence. Okay, that was weird. I got up, did a quick walk through the apartment. Kitchen, bedroom, bathroom. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. The red light had just been a glitch. I went to bed and lay there in the dark for a long time, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was silent except for the soft whir of the heating system. Outside, the city glowed orange and distant through my window. I kept thinking about how the lights had looked, how they'd all changed at once, every bulb in the apartment perfectly synchronized. Glitches usually aren't that coordinated. Usually one light acts up while the others stay normal, but this had been all of them, at exactly the same time, at exactly 3:12 a.m. Eventually, I fell asleep, and when I woke up the next morning, the lights were fine. Everything was fine. I convinced myself it was nothing, a weird bug, the kind of thing you laugh about later, tell your friends at a party. One time my smart lights all turned red in the middle of the night. Freaked me the hell out. I didn't tell anyone, though. Didn't seem worth mentioning. I wish I had. I wish I'd paid attention. I wish I'd understood that it wasn't a glitch at all. It was a message, and whoever sent it had been watching me for a very long time. It happened again 3 nights later. Same thing. I woke up, and the apartment was bathed in red, that deep, bloody crimson that made everything look like a crime scene. I grabbed my phone before I was even fully awake, already knowing what I'd see. 3:12 a.m. Exactly. This time I didn't just reset the lights. I sat there in that red glow and opened the command history in my smart home app. Every action gets logged, every time a light turns on or off, every temperature adjustment, every voice command. If something had triggered this, it would be in the logs. There it was. 3:12 a.m. Command. Set all lights to red, 100% brightness. But there was no source listed. No device ID, no user account, nothing to indicate where the command had come from. It just said API call, which meant someone had accessed my system directly, bypassing the app entirely. My stomach dropped. I'm a developer. I know what that means. Someone had gotten into my smart home network. Someone was controlling my lights remotely. I told myself it could still be innocent. Maybe my system had been caught up in some kind of botnet attack. Hackers use compromised smart devices for all kinds of things. Maybe it was just random, not personal. But why red? And why 3:12 a.m.? Twice now. Exactly the same time. Exactly the same color. That didn't feel random. That felt deliberate. I changed all my passwords that night. Every account, every device, every service connected to my smart home. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything. I checked my router logs, looked for unfamiliar devices on my network. Found nothing suspicious. I went to bed feeling better, secure. I'd locked everything down. Whatever vulnerability had let someone in, I'd closed it. 2 nights later, I woke up at 3:12 a.m. to red lights. This time, I didn't even check the app. I just lay there in that crimson glow, heart pounding, trying to understand how this was possible. I'd changed everything, every password, every access point. There was no way someone should still be able to get in, unless they'd never left. The thought made me physically sick. I got up, walked through the apartment, looked at every device like it might bite me. The voice assistant on my kitchen counter, the smart thermostat on the wall, the cameras I'd installed for security, the cameras. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the security footage, scrolled back to 3:12 a.m., watched myself sleeping on the couch, the apartment dark and peaceful. Then, at exactly 3:12, the lights turned red. All of them, all at once. I watched myself jerk awake, watched the confusion on my face as I looked around. Nothing else. No movement, no intruders, no explanation. Just the lights changing and me waking up. I started sleeping with my laptop open, the security feed live on my screen. I told myself it was just caution, just being smart. But really, I was scared. Scared in my own home, surrounded by technology I'd installed to make myself feel safe. The next incident was different. I was working late, headphones on, deep in code. It was maybe 1 a.m. The apartment was quiet, just the ambient glow of my monitors and the soft hum of the heating system. My voice assistant spoke. Playing requested audio. I pulled off my headphones. I hadn't requested anything, hadn't said the wake word, hadn't touched my phone. Then the sound started. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing coming from the speaker in my living room, like someone was standing right next to the microphone, inhaling and exhaling, deliberate and rhythmic. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Just sat there, frozen, listening to someone breathe in my apartment. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. Then it stopped, and the voice assistant chirped its usual tone. Audio complete. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I pulled up the voice assistant's history, looking for what had triggered it. There it was, a command I hadn't given, audio I hadn't requested. The file was labeled goodnight.mp3. Someone had uploaded a recording of themselves breathing to my voice assistant and played it remotely. While I was home, while I was awake. They wanted me to hear it. They wanted me to know they were there. I ripped the voice assistant out of the wall, unplugged every smart speaker in the apartment, stood there in my kitchen at 1:30 in the morning, heart hammering against my ribs, surrounded by disconnected devices and absolute silence. It should have made me feel better. It didn't. because I was starting to understand something. Whoever was doing this, they weren't just in my network. They were watching me. They knew my schedule, knew when I was home, knew when I was awake and when I was asleep. They'd been paying attention for God knows how long, learning my patterns, waiting for the right moments. And I had no idea who they were or what they wanted. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in my desk chair with all the lights on, white lights, lights I controlled manually, lights that couldn't be turned red by someone I couldn't see, and I waited for 3:12 a.m. It came and went. Nothing happened. But I knew it wasn't over. I knew whoever was doing this was still out there, still watching, still waiting. The silence wasn't safety. It was patience. I took a sick day from work. Couldn't focus. Couldn't think about anything except the breathing, the red lights, the feeling of being watched in my own home. I needed to understand what was happening. I needed to find the source. I'm good at this. It's literally my job, finding vulnerabilities, tracing access, understanding how systems get compromised. If someone was in my network, I could find them. I had to believe that. I started with a full audit of every device, pulled logs from my router going back months, checked firmware versions, looked for unauthorized modifications, traced every connection in and out of my apartment's network. What I found made me want to throw up. The first unauthorized access was logged on September 23rd, the day I moved in. Someone had been in my network from the very beginning, before I'd changed a single default password, before I'd set up my security cameras, before I'd done anything at all. They were already there, watching, waiting. I scrolled through months of logs, and the picture that emerged was horrifying. They'd been careful, patient. Small intrusions at first, just probing my network, mapping my devices. Then they'd gotten bolder, accessing my smart thermostat to learn my schedule, when I woke up, when I went to bed, when I left the apartment, pulling data from my voice assistants, every command I'd ever given, every conversation I'd had within earshot of those speakers, and the cameras. God, the cameras. I'd installed them for security, 2 of them, one at my front door, one in my hallway. I thought they'd make me safer. I thought they'd let me see if anyone was watching, but they'd been compromised from day one. Someone had been accessing the feeds remotely, downloading footage, watching me come and go, watching me sit at my desk for hours, watching me pace my apartment at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep, watching me cry on my couch the week after the engagement ended, when I couldn't hold it together anymore. They'd seen everything, every vulnerable moment, every private thing I thought I was doing alone. I found a folder on a server I didn't recognize. My cameras had been uploading to it automatically, without my knowledge. When I finally cracked my way in, there were hundreds of files, gigabytes of footage, all of me. I couldn't bring myself to watch more than a few seconds. Just seeing the thumbnails, me at my desk, me on my couch, me walking to my bedroom, made my skin crawl. This wasn't random. This wasn't some botnet attack or opportunistic hacker. Someone had been studying me, collecting me, building an archive of my life. There was a text file in the folder, just one, sitting at the bottom of the list. The file name was my full name. I opened it. Inside was everything. My work history, my social media accounts, my ex-fiance's name, her new address, her phone number, my parents' names, my sister's name, the elementary school I'd attended, the college I'd graduated from, the company I worked for, medical information, allergies, prescriptions, the therapist I'd seen twice after the breakup, credit card numbers, bank account balances. My entire life compiled into a single document by someone I'd never met. At the bottom, there was a note, just one line. You shouldn't have unplugged me. The voice assistants, the ones I'd ripped out of the wall the night before. I stood up so fast, my chair fell over, looked around my apartment with new eyes, the thermostat on the wall, the smart lock on my door, the router blinking quietly in the corner, all of it connected, all of it compromised. And the cameras. The cameras were still running. I lunged for them, ripped the one in the hallway off its mount, yanked the cord out of the wall, did the same to the one by the front door, held them in my hands like they were something alive, something that might bite. But it was too late. I knew it was too late. They'd had months of footage, months of data, months of learning everything about me while I sat there thinking I was safe, thinking I was in control. My phone buzzed, a notification from my smart lock app. I opened it, hands trembling. Front door unlocked. I looked at my door. It was 10 feet away. The deadbolt was retracted. The door was still closed, but it wasn't locked anymore. Someone had just unlocked my front door from the outside while I was standing right here. I didn't think. I grabbed my laptop, my phone, my wallet, shoved them into my backpack, ran to the door, threw it open, and sprinted for the stairwell. I couldn't wait for the elevator. Couldn't stand still in that hallway, wondering if someone was about to step out of the shadows. 12 flights of stairs. I took them 2 at a time, my footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell, my breath ragged and loud in my ears. I burst out of the building into the cold November night, and I didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away, standing on a street corner, shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I looked back at my building, 12th floor. My windows were dark, but I swore I saw a light turn on. Just for a second. Just a flash of red, there and gone. 12 stories up. I called the police from a coffee shop that was still open. Told them someone had been hacking my apartment, had unlocked my door remotely, had been stalking me for months. The officer on the phone sounded skeptical, kept asking if I was sure, if maybe I'd just forgotten to lock it, if maybe the lights were just malfunctioning. I wanted to scream, but I kept my voice calm, gave them my address, waited. They sent someone to check the apartment, found nothing. No intruders, no signs of forced entry, nothing out of place. The officer who called me back said everything looked fine. Fine. Like my entire life hadn't just been ripped open by a stranger. Like I hadn't been watched for months without knowing. Like everything was fine. I didn't go home that night. I wasn't sure I'd ever go home again. I stayed at a hotel for a week, paid cash, used a burner phone I bought at a convenience store. Didn't tell anyone where I was. Not my parents, not my friends, not my boss. Just sent an email saying I had a family emergency and needed time off. I couldn't stop thinking about that text file, my whole life, laid out like a specimen on a slide. Someone had taken the time to compile all of that, to research me, to build a profile so complete it felt like they knew me better than I knew myself. But why? What did they want? I spent those hotel nights digging. I'd copied the server files before I fled, everything I could grab in those panicked minutes before my door unlocked itself. Now I went through them systematically, looking for anything that might tell me who was behind this. The footage was the hardest part. Hundreds of hours of me living my life, completely unaware. I made myself watch some of it. Not all. I couldn't stomach all of it. But enough to understand the scope. They'd been watching me eat breakfast, watching me argue with my ex on the phone, watching me sleep. There was footage of me in my underwear, footage of me singing badly in my kitchen, footage of me having a complete breakdown the night I realized my engagement was really over. Intimate moments, vulnerable moments, things no one was ever supposed to see. I found timestamps on the files. The earliest footage was from September 24th, the day after I moved in. The most recent was from 2 days ago, the night I'd ripped out the cameras. The last file was just 12 seconds long. Me, standing in my hallway, holding the camera I'd just torn off the wall, staring into the lens with an expression of pure horror. They'd captured the moment I found out. They'd wanted that too. I dug deeper into the server, tracing its registration, its hosting history. Most of it was hidden behind layers of anonymization, but I'm good at this. I found a thread, a payment record that hadn't been scrubbed properly, A name, not the stalker's name. The name of the company that owned the server space. It was the same company that manufactured my smart home hub. I didn't understand at first. Thought maybe I'd made a mistake, misread something, but I checked again, then again. The server that had been storing footage of me for months was registered to a subsidiary of the company that made the device sitting on my kitchen counter. The hub that connected all my smart devices. The brain of my entire system. I called the company's support line from my burner phone, asked about data storage, about remote access, about security protocols. The representative was friendly, helpful, completely useless. No, they assured me, customer data was never stored externally. No, there was no way for third parties to access device networks. Their systems were completely secure. They were lying, or they didn't know. Either way, it didn't help. I started researching the company online, found forums full of complaints, people talking about strange behavior from their devices, unexplained access logs, the feeling of being watched. Most of it was dismissed as paranoia or user error. But buried in the threads, I found something else. A post from 8 months ago. A woman describing exactly what I'd experienced. Red lights at night, unexplained commands. The feeling that someone was in her network, watching her every move. She'd lived in my building. Same address, different apartment number. I felt the blood drain from my face. I searched for more, found 3 other posts, spanning 2 years, all from people who'd lived in my building, all describing the same thing, smart devices behaving strangely, the sensation of being watched, escalating incidents that made them feel unsafe in their own homes. None of them had gotten answers. They'd all eventually moved out, stopped posting, disappeared from the forums. I thought about the apartment I'd rented, how cheap it had been for the area, how quickly the landlord had accepted my application, how eager he'd seemed to get someone in there, how many people had lived there before me, how many had experienced the same thing. I went back to the server files, looking for anything I might have missed. That's when I found the other folders, not just me, dozens of them, labeled with apartment numbers. My building had 40 units. There were 37 folders on that server. I opened one at random. Footage of a woman I didn't recognize, sitting on a couch I didn't recognize, in an apartment that looked nothing like mine. But the angle was the same. The quality was the same. Captured through a security camera she'd probably installed herself, thinking it would keep her safe. I closed the folder, opened another. A man at a desk, working on a laptop, headphones on, completely unaware. Another folder. A couple cooking dinner together, laughing at something I couldn't hear. All of them watched. All of them recorded. All of them stored on the same server, organized by apartment number, archived like specimens in a collection. This wasn't just about me. Someone had compromised the entire building. Every smart device, every camera, every microphone. They'd been harvesting footage of everyone who lived there for years, and I had no idea why. I sat in my hotel room staring at my laptop screen, and I felt something shift inside me. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Anger, determination. Someone was doing this, a person with a name and a face and a reason. And I was going to find them. I just didn't realize they'd already found me. On the 6th night at the hotel, I woke up to my burner phone buzzing on the nightstand. A text from a number I didn't recognize. No words, just a photo. Me, asleep, in the hotel bed, taken from somewhere near the window. I scrambled out of bed so fast I fell, cracking my knee against the nightstand. Didn't feel it. Couldn't feel anything except the ice flooding my veins as I looked at that photo. My face slack with sleep, the hotel comforter pulled up to my chin, the dim glow of the alarm clock visible in the corner of the frame. Someone had been in my room, or outside my window, on the 8th floor. I tore back the curtains. Nothing but glass and the city lights beyond. No balcony, no ledge, no way for anyone to be standing out there. But the photo was real. The angle was real. Someone had taken it, somehow, from somewhere. I grabbed my things and ran. Third hotel in 6 days. Paid cash again. Didn't sleep. The next morning, another text. Same number, another photo. Me, standing at the front desk of the new hotel, checking in. Taken from across the lobby, slightly blurred, like they'd been in a hurry. They were following me, physically following me. It wasn't just cameras and networks anymore. They were there, in person, watching me move through the world. I went to the police again, showed them everything, the server files, the footage, the forum posts, the texts. This time they took me seriously. A detective named Morrison spent 3 hours going through my evidence, asking questions, taking notes. "This is sophisticated," he said finally. "This isn't some kid in a basement. Whoever did this has resources, technical knowledge, access." He promised to investigate, promised to look into the building, the company, the server, promised they'd find whoever was doing this. They didn't. The server was wiped clean within 24 hours of my police report. Every file, every folder, every piece of evidence I hadn't already copied, gone. The forum posts I'd found were deleted. The users who'd written them had deactivated their accounts. Morrison called me 2 weeks later. They'd traced the server to a company in Estonia that didn't exist anymore. The payment records led to a shell corporation that led to another shell corporation that led to nothing. The manufacturer of my smart home hub denied everything and threatened legal action if the police kept asking questions. Dead ends, all of it. They never found out who owned those 37 folders, never identified the person who'd been following me, never explained how someone had taken a photo of me sleeping in a hotel room on the 8th floor. The case went cold. Morrison stopped calling. Life, apparently, was supposed to go on. I moved to a different city, different state, sold everything I owned except my clothes and my laptop, and even the laptop I wiped clean and rebuilt from scratch. No smart devices, no voice assistants, no cameras. I bought a flip phone, paid for everything in cash, rented an apartment with actual keys, actual deadbolts, actual locks that couldn't be opened by someone on the other side of the world. It's been 14 months now. I check the locks 4 times before bed. I sweep my apartment for hidden devices once a week, cameras, microphones, anything that shouldn't be there. I don't use Wi-Fi. Don't connect to anything I don't absolutely have to. I know how it sounds. I know people think I'm paranoid. My therapist says I have PTSD, that the hypervigilance is a trauma response, that eventually I'll feel safe again. I don't think I will. Because here's the thing. I never found out who they were. I never found out why they were watching me, what they wanted, what they were building toward. Were they selling the footage? Blackmailing people? Just collecting us for the pleasure of it? I don't know. I'll probably never know. And I don't know if they stopped. That's the part that keeps me up at night. Just because I moved, just because I disconnected, just because I made myself as invisible as I possibly could, that doesn't mean they lost interest. It doesn't mean they stopped watching. Sometimes I walk down the street and I feel eyes on me. I turn around, and there's no one there. Just crowds, just strangers, just the normal flow of people living their normal lives. But I can't shake the feeling. Can't convince myself it's over. Last month, I got a new phone. Same burner model I've been using. Prepaid minutes, no data plan. I was setting it up when I noticed something strange. There was already a contact saved in the phone book. Just one. No name, just a number. I stared at it for a long time. Told myself it was a factory error, a glitch, something left over from testing. But I recognized the number. It was the same one that had texted me those photos in the hotel. I threw the phone away, bought a new one. Different brand, different store, different city. That one was clean. So far, I used to love technology, used to feel like it made my life better. easier, more connected. Now I understand what we're really doing when we fill our homes with cameras and microphones and devices that watch us every second of every day. We're inviting strangers in. We're giving them eyes and ears in our most private spaces. We're trusting that the people on the other end, the companies, the developers, the unknown hands that touch our data, have our best interests at heart. They don't. Someone is always watching. Someone is always listening. And by the time you realize it, by the time the lights turn red at 3:12 a.m., it's already too late. They already know everything about you. Check your devices, check your networks, check the corners of your room where the shadows gather. You might not be as alone as you think. Story 3, the diner where the customers never blinked. There's a rule I should have listened to. The cook told me on my very first night, and I laughed it off because I thought he was hazing the new girl. I thought he was just trying to scare me. He wasn't. I was 22, 2 semesters away from finishing my nursing degree, and completely broke. My financial aid had fallen through, my parents couldn't help, and I was 3 weeks from having to drop out when I found the job listing. Overnight server at a highway diner, 40 miles outside of town. The pay was almost double what I'd been making at the campus coffee shop. I didn't ask questions. I just needed the money. The diner was called Millie's, one of those old roadside places that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1975. Cracked vinyl booths, speckled linoleum floors, a long counter with spinning stools that squeaked when you sat on them. There was a neon sign out front that buzzed and flickered, casting pink light across the empty parking lot. The whole place had this feeling of being forgotten, like the rest of the world had moved on and left it behind. My shift ran from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. 8 hours of fluorescent lights and truck drivers and the endless hum of the coffee machine. The first few weeks were boring in the best way. I'd serve maybe 10 customers a night, refill coffee cups, wipe down tables, study for my classes when things got quiet. The money was good, and the work was easy. I thought I'd gotten lucky. The only other employee on my shift was the cook. His name was Earl, this weathered guy in his 60s with nicotine-stained fingers and a permanent squint. He didn't talk much, just grunted at orders and slid plates through the window. I figured he was the quiet type. Figured he'd seen enough overnight shifts to stop caring about small talk. It was my second week when he gave me the rule. I was restocking the sugar dispensers, killing time during a dead stretch around 1 in the morning. Rain was coming down hard outside, drumming against the windows, turning the parking lot into a sheet of black glass. Earl came out of the kitchen, which was unusual. He almost never left his station. He stood there watching me for a moment, then spoke in this low, serious voice I hadn't heard from him before. "You're gonna see some strange folks come through here," he said. "Late night, after 2, sometimes 3 in the morning. They'll come in groups. Real quiet. Won't talk to each other. Won't make much noise." I smiled, waiting for the punchline. Okay. "When they come in, you take their order and you bring their food. That's it. Don't stare at them. Don't ask them questions. Don't try to make conversation." He paused, his eyes fixed on mine. "And whatever you do, don't look at them for too long." I laughed. Couldn't help it. What? Are they vampires or something? Earl didn't laugh, didn't even smile. He just looked at me with this expression I couldn't read, something between pity and warning. "Just do what I said," he told me. "You'll understand when you see them." Then he went back into the kitchen and didn't say another word for the rest of the night. I told myself he was messing with me, some kind of initiation ritual for the new server, trying to spook me into quitting so he could go back to working alone. I'd worked enough service jobs to know that veteran employees liked to haze the newcomers. This was just Earl's version of that. I didn't think about it again, not for another week. The diner had its regulars, a handful of truckers who came through the same time every few nights, A couple of insomniacs from the nearby town who liked the quiet. An old woman named Dottie who ordered the same thing every single visit and tipped in exact change. I learned their names, their orders, their little quirks. They were normal people, tired people, people just trying to get through the night like I was. And then there were the others. It was a Thursday, or maybe Friday. The nights blur together when you work that shift. And I was leaning against the counter, half watching the rain streak down the windows, half reading a chapter on pharmacology. The clock on the wall said 2:47 a.m. Earl was in the back doing something with the fryer. The diner was empty. The bell above the door chimed. I looked up, and 4 people walked in. They moved together, perfectly synchronized, like they'd rehearsed it. 2 men, 2 women, all of them dressed in plain, dark clothing. They didn't speak to each other, didn't look at each other, just walked in single file and slid into the corner booth without a word. Something about them made me hesitate. I couldn't place it at first. They looked normal enough, clean, well-groomed, nothing obviously wrong. But there was this feeling in my stomach, this cold twist of instinct that made me want to stay behind the counter. I grabbed my notepad and walked over anyway, smiled my customer service smile. "Evening, folks. What can I get you?" They all looked at me at the same time, 4 heads turning in unison, 4 pairs of eyes fixing on my face. And that's when I noticed they weren't blinking, not one of them. Their eyes were open and fixed, unmoving, staring at me without a single flutter of their lids. I stood there, pen hovering over my notepad, waiting for one of them to blink, to break the stare, to do something human. They didn't. "Coffee," one of the men said. "Black." "Coffee," said the woman next to him. Same words, same flat inflection. "Black." "Coffee. Black." "Coffee. Black." 4 identical orders, 4 identical voices, 4 unblinking stares. "Coming right up," I heard myself say. I walked back to the counter on legs that didn't feel like mine, poured 4 cups of coffee with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. When I turned around to bring them over, all 4 of them were still watching me. They hadn't moved, hadn't looked away, hadn't blinked once. I set the cups down without meeting their eyes, went back behind the counter, didn't turn around again until I heard the bell chime and the door swing shut. They'd left exact change on the table, no tip. The coffee cups were empty, but I hadn't seen any of them drink. Earl was standing in the kitchen window watching me. "Now you understand," he said. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because he was right. I understood now. Something was very wrong with this place. Something was very wrong with the people who came here after 2 a.m. And I had a feeling I was only beginning to see how deep it went. They came back 3 nights later. Different people this time. A group of 5, 3 women and 2 men. But the same behavior. Same synchronized movements. Same flat voices ordering black coffee. Same unblinking stares that followed me across the diner like searchlights. I did what Earl told me. Took their order, brought their coffee. Didn't look at them for more than a second or 2 at a time. When they left, the cups were empty again. I still hadn't seen any of them lift them to their lips. The next week, it was a group of 7, then 4, then 9. They always came after 2 a.m., always sat in the same corner booth or the long table by the windows, always ordered black coffee in those identical, emotionless voices. They never ate, never spoke to each other, never did anything except sit there and watch me with those horrible, unblinking eyes. I started studying them when they weren't looking directly at me. Quick glances while I pretended to wipe down the counter. Stolen looks in the reflection of the chrome napkin dispensers. The more I looked, the more wrong they became. Their movements were too smooth, not graceful, smooth, like their joints didn't quite work the way human joints should. When they lifted their coffee cups, their arms moved in these perfect mechanical arcs. No hesitation, no adjustment, no tiny corrections that people normally make without thinking. It was like watching animatronics. like watching something that had learned to imitate human motion without understanding it. Their skin was wrong too. It took me a few visits to notice, but once I did, I couldn't unsee it. It was too even. No pores, no blemishes, no tiny variations in texture that real skin has. Under the fluorescent lights of the diner, they looked almost waxy, almost artificial. And their breathing, or lack of it. I watched for it specifically one night, staring at their chests from behind the counter, waiting to see them rise and fall. They didn't, not once. For the entire 45 minutes they sat there, not a single one of them appeared to breathe. I tried asking Earl about them, cornered him in the kitchen during a quiet stretch, kept my voice low even though the diner was empty. "Who are they?" I asked. "What are they?" He shook his head. "Don't know. Don't want to know." "How long has this been happening?" "Long as I've worked here, 23 years. He scraped the grill without looking at me. "Longer than that, probably. Millie used to talk about them back when she was still alive. Said her daddy saw them too when he opened the place in '52. Since 1952. This had been going on for over 70 years. Has anyone ever... I swallowed. Has anyone ever tried to find out what they are? Earl stopped scraping, looked at me with those tired, knowing eyes. There was a girl who worked here before you, maybe 6, 7 years back. She got curious, started watching them too close, started asking them questions. He turned back to the grill. She's not around anymore. What happened to her? Don't know. She just stopped showing up one night, never came back for her last paycheck, never answered her phone. He paused. I drove by her apartment once. Lights were off. Car was gone, like she'd never existed. I felt cold all over. Did they? I don't know what they did, Earl said firmly. And I don't want to know. Neither do you. Just follow the rules and you'll be fine. But I couldn't stop watching them. Couldn't stop cataloging the wrongness, the details that added up to something impossible. I told myself I was being careful. Quick glances. Nothing obvious. Nothing that would draw their attention. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday night, maybe 3 weeks after my first encounter. A group of 6 had come in around 2:30, and I'd done my usual routine. Took their orders, brought their coffee, retreated behind the counter. I was pretending to reorganize the pie case when I noticed one of them looking at me. Not the way they usually looked. This was different. This was focused. She was sitting at the end of the booth, a woman with dark hair and pale skin and eyes that should have been brown but seemed almost black under the diner lights. While the others stared straight ahead, she was watching me. Just me. Her head had turned slightly, independently of the rest of them. I looked away fast, heart pounding, hands gripping the edge of the counter. When I glanced back, she was still watching, and then she smiled. It was the worst thing I'd ever seen. Her lips pulled back from her teeth in this slow, deliberate motion, but the rest of her face didn't move. No crinkle around her eyes, no shift in her cheeks. Just this mechanical stretching of her mouth into something that resembled a smile but felt like a threat. I didn't look at her again, kept my eyes down until I heard the bell chime and the door close. When I finally looked up, the booth was empty. The coffee cups were empty, and there was something on the table that hadn't been there before. A photograph. I walked over on legs that felt like water, picked it up with trembling fingers. It was a picture of me, standing behind the counter, taken from somewhere inside the diner. I flipped it over. On the back, written in neat, careful handwriting, "She watches back." I looked at Earl. He'd seen the photo, seen my face. He just shook his head slowly, something like grief in his eyes. "You looked too long," he said. They noticed. The rain kept falling outside. The coffee machine kept humming. And somewhere out there in the dark, beyond the neon glow of the parking lot, something was watching me. Something that didn't blink. I should have quit, should have walked out that night, driven the 40 miles back to town, and never looked at that diner again. The money wasn't worth this. Nothing was worth this. But I needed the job, needed the tuition, needed to believe that if I just followed the rules, kept my head down, stopped looking so closely, everything would go back to normal. So I stayed. The next few shifts, they didn't come in. The diner was quiet, just the usual truckers and insomniacs and Dottie with her exact change. I started to relax, told myself the photograph was a warning, not a promise. They'd scared me, and now they'd move on, find someone else to watch. Then I saw one of them in town. It was a Saturday afternoon, broad daylight. I was walking out of the grocery store, arms full of bags, thinking about nothing in particular. And there she was, the woman with the dark hair, the one who had smiled at me. She was standing across the parking lot, perfectly still, watching me. I froze, nearly dropped my groceries. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. She was wearing different clothes, a pale blue dress instead of the dark outfit from the diner, but it was her. Same waxy skin, same too smooth features, same black eyes fixed on me without blinking. I stood there for what felt like hours, couldn't move, couldn't breathe, just staring back at her across the rows of parked cars, the afternoon sun beating down, the normal sounds of the world, engines and shopping carts and distant conversation, feeling impossibly far away. Then she smiled, that same terrible smile, lips stretching mechanically while the rest of her face stayed frozen. A car drove past, blocking my view for half a second. When it cleared, she was gone. I ran to my car, locked the doors, sat there shaking for 20 minutes before I could drive home. After that, I saw them everywhere. Standing at the bus stop near my apartment complex, motionless, watching my window. Sitting in a parked car outside the campus library, their pale faces visible through the windshield. Walking down the street in perfect synchronization, heads turning to follow me as I passed. They never approached, never spoke, just watched. Let me know they were there. Let me know they could find me wherever I went. I stopped sleeping. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined them standing outside my door, standing at the foot of my bed, standing in my room with those unblinking eyes, watching me breathe. I tried to tell people. My roommate first, sat her down, told her everything, showed her the photograph from the diner. She looked at me like I was crazy, said I was probably just stressed, seeing things, making connections that weren't there. The photograph just showed an empty counter, no one in it. I grabbed it from her hands, stared at it. She was right. The image had changed. Where I'd clearly seen myself standing behind the counter, there was nothing now. Just the empty diner, the coffee machine, the pie case. But when I turned it over, the words were still there. She watches back. My roommate didn't see those either, said the back was blank. I stopped trying to tell people after that. The next time I went to work, Earl took one look at my face and knew. "They're following you," he said. Not a question. I nodded, couldn't speak. He sighed. Looked older than I'd ever seen him, the lines in his face deeper, his eyes heavy with something like resignation. "There was one other person," he said slowly, "before the girl who disappeared. A man who worked here in the 80s. He saw them outside the diner too, in town, following him around." What happened to him? Earl was quiet for a long moment. Rain was pattering against the windows, soft and steady, filling the silence. "He tried to run," Earl said finally. "Packed up his whole life and drove west. Thought if he got far enough away, they'd stop following." He shook his head. They found his car 3 weeks later, on the side of the highway, about 200 miles from here. Engine still running, door hanging open. No sign of him. No sign, nothing. Like he just stepped out and vanished. Earl looked at me. They found something in the passenger seat, though. A coffee cup, black coffee, still warm. I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. What are you saying? That I can't leave? That I'm trapped here? I'm saying running didn't help him. Earl turned back to the grill. I'm saying the only people I've seen survive this place are the ones who follow the rules. Keep their heads down. Don't look too long. Don't ask too many questions. But I already broke the rules, I whispered. They already noticed me. Earl didn't answer, didn't have to. We both knew what that meant. That night, a group of 8 came in at 3:15 a.m. I took their orders, brought their coffee, kept my eyes on the floor, the counter, anywhere but their faces. But I could feel her watching me, the woman with the dark hair. I could feel her smile even though I refused to look at it. When they left, there was another photograph on the table. This one showed my apartment building, my window, my bedroom light glowing in the darkness. On the back, in that same neat handwriting, soon. I stared at that word until my vision blurred, until the letters stopped looking like letters and became something else. A promise, a countdown. They weren't just watching me anymore. They were waiting. 3 days after the second photograph, I woke up at 3:12 a.m. I don't know what pulled me out of sleep. No sound, no light, nothing I could identify. Just this sudden, violent awareness, like my body knew something was wrong before my mind caught up. My bedroom was dark. The apartment was silent, but the air felt different, heavy, charged with something I couldn't name. I lay there, not moving, barely breathing, staring at the ceiling, listening. Nothing. Then I heard it. A sound so faint, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Breathing, slow and deliberate, coming from somewhere inside my room. I turned my head. Just a fraction, just enough to see. She was standing in the corner, the woman with the dark hair, the one who smiled. She was standing in the corner of my bedroom, perfectly still, her black eyes fixed on me. The streetlight through my window cast just enough glow to see her face, that waxy skin, those 2 smooth features, that expression of absolute nothing. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. My body had locked up completely, every muscle frozen, every nerve screaming in silent terror. She tilted her head, slowly, mechanically, like a bird examining something small and interesting. Then she smiled. I squeezed my eyes shut, couldn't look at that smile, couldn't watch those lips stretch while the rest of her face stayed dead and frozen. I pressed my face into the pillow and prayed, actually prayed for the first time since I was a child, that when I opened my eyes she'd be gone. I don't know how long I lay there, minutes, hours. Time stopped meaning anything. I just kept my eyes closed and listened to that slow, deliberate breathing, waiting for her to move, to touch me, to do whatever she'd come to do. The breathing stopped. I waited, counted to 100, counted to 100 again. Silence. When I finally opened my eyes, the corner was empty. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Just sat there in bed with every light on, watching the corners, watching the doorway, watching for any sign of movement. By the time the sun came up, I was shaking so badly I could barely hold a glass of water. I called in sick to my classes. Couldn't function. Couldn't think about anything except those black eyes watching me in the dark. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. No words. Just a photograph. Me. Asleep in my bed. Taken from the corner of my room. I threw up in the bathroom sink. That night, I went to work. I don't know why. Maybe because the diner felt safer than my apartment. Maybe because Earl was the only person who understood what was happening. Maybe because I just needed to not be alone. I drove the 40 miles in a daze, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. Earl took one look at me and poured a cup of coffee without asking. "They came to you," he said. I nodded, couldn't form words. He was quiet for a long time. The diner was empty. Too early for the truckers, too early for the others. Just the two of us and the hum of the lights and the rain starting to fall outside. "There might be a way," he said finally. "Something Millie told me once, before she passed." I looked up. "What?" "She said her father figured something out. Back in the early days, when this first started happening, he noticed that they never came for the people who worked here, only the ones who left." "What do you mean?" "The diner's special to them somehow. I don't know why. Maybe it's where they come from. Maybe it's some kind of territory. But as long as you're part of this place, really part of it, they don't take you." He looked at me with those tired eyes. The ones who disappeared. They were trying to leave, trying to get away. But you can't get away from them. You can only belong to something they won't touch. "You're saying I have to stay here forever?" "I'm saying Millie worked here for 61 years, saw those things come in every week, sometimes more. They never touched her, never followed her home. She died in her sleep at 87 years old, peaceful as anything." Earl shrugged. "That's better than what happened to the others." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that was insane, that I couldn't spend my life working at a highway diner, that I had plans and dreams and a future that didn't involve serving black coffee to things that weren't human. But then I thought about the photograph. Me, asleep, taken from inside my room. I thought about the word written on the back of the last one. Soon. I thought about the man from the 80s, his car found on the side of the highway, door open, engine running, a cup of warm coffee in the passenger seat. "What do I have to do?" I whispered. Earl reached under the counter and pulled out a key. Old brass, worn smooth from decades of handling. "This was Millie's," he said. "She gave it to me before she died, said to pass it on to someone who needed it." He held it out to me. "It opens the back office. There's a book in there, a ledger, real old. You sign your name in it, and you become part of this place, really part of it, the way Millie was, the way I am." I stared at the key. Such a small thing, such a simple thing. "And if I sign it, then you belong to the diner, and they can't take what already belongs to somewhere else." I took the key. It was cold in my palm, cold and heavy and final. At 2:47 a.m., a group of 6 walked through the door. I didn't look at them, didn't need to. I could feel them watching me, feel those unblinking eyes tracking my every movement. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I knew what I had to do. The back office was smaller than I expected. Just a desk, a filing cabinet, and decades of dust coating every surface. The air smelled like old paper and something else, something faintly metallic that I couldn't identify. The ledger was in the bottom drawer, leather-bound, cracked with age, the pages yellowed and brittle. I carried it to the desk and opened it under the dim light of a single bulb. Names, dozens of them, written in different hands across different decades. Some in faded ink that had turned brown with time. Some in pencil, barely legible. Some in handwriting so shaky they must have been written by people as terrified as I was. I found Millie's name near the middle. Millicent Hargrove, 1961. Below it, years later, Earl's, Earl Douglas, 1999. And below that, empty lines. Waiting. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at those blank spaces. Long enough for my hands to stop shaking. Long enough for the weight of what I was about to do to settle into my bones. I was giving up everything. My degree, my future. The life I'd imagined for myself. The career, the apartment in the city. The person I was supposed to become. All of it gone. Traded for survival. Traded for the privilege of not being taken by things I couldn't understand. But then I thought about the alternative, the man on the highway, The girl who disappeared. The photograph of me sleeping, taken by something that had stood in my room and watched me breathe. I picked up the pen. My hand was steadier than I expected. I wrote my name in careful letters on the first empty line. The date, the time, 3:33 a.m. The moment I lifted the pen, something shifted. I can't explain it any better than that. The air in the room changed, got lighter, like a pressure I hadn't even noticed had suddenly released. I closed the ledger, put it back in the drawer, walked out of the office and locked the door behind me. Earl was waiting at the counter. He looked at my face and nodded slowly. "It's done?" "It's done." He poured me a cup of coffee, set it in front of me without a word. We sat there together in silence while the rain fell outside and the neon sign buzzed and flickered. At 4:15, the group of 6 finally left. I didn't look at them, didn't need to. But as they filed past the counter, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Acknowledgement, like they knew what I'd done, like they accepted it. The woman with the dark hair paused at the door. I kept my eyes on my coffee cup, on the black surface reflecting the fluorescent lights. "Welcome," she said. Her voice was different than before, still flat, still wrong. But there was something underneath it now, something almost like warmth. Then the bell chimed, the door swung shut, and they were gone. I never saw them outside the diner again. Never found them waiting at bus stops or parked outside my apartment or walking down the street with their heads turning to follow me. Whatever claim they'd had on me, whatever countdown had been ticking toward soon, it stopped the moment I signed my name in that ledger. But I still see them, every week, sometimes more. They come in after 2 a.m., order their black coffee, sit in their booths with those unblinking eyes. I take their orders, bring their drinks, keep my head down and my mouth shut. It's been 4 years now. I dropped out of nursing school. Couldn't maintain both lives. The 40-mile drive, the overnight shifts, the exhaustion that never quite went away. I told my parents I'd found something else, something that suited me better. They were confused, disappointed, but they accepted it eventually. People always accept things eventually. I moved into the apartment above the diner. It was Millie's once, then Earl's. Now it's mine. The rent is cheap, practically nothing, and I never have to worry about them following me home. This is home now. This is where I belong. Earl retired last year. 71 years old, bad back, hands that shook when he tried to work the grill. I hugged him on his last night, and he held on longer than I expected. "You'll be okay," he said. "Just remember the rules." I remember them, every night, every shift. Don't look too long, don't ask questions, don't try to understand what they are or where they come from or what they want. Just serve the coffee, just belong. Sometimes new employees come through, young people like I was, desperate for money, willing to work the overnight shift at a diner in the middle of nowhere. Most of them don't last. They get spooked by the customers, by the atmosphere, by the feeling that something isn't right. They quit after a week or two and never come back. But sometimes, rarely, one of them looks at me with that expression I remember, that mixture of terror and curiosity, that desperate need to understand. When I see that look, I tell them what Earl told me, the rules, the warning, the knowledge that there are things in this world we aren't meant to comprehend, and the best we can do is learn to live alongside them. Most of them don't listen. They look too long, ask too many questions, and then one night they stop showing up, and I find myself hoping they just quit, hoping they just moved away, hoping they weren't taken. I'm 26 now. If I'm lucky, if I follow the rules, keep my head down, stay part of this place, I'll work here until I'm old and gray. I'll die in the apartment upstairs, peaceful and quiet, and someone else will take my place. It's not the life I planned, not even close, but it's a life. And in a world where things that don't blink come in after 2 a.m. and order black coffee and watch you with eyes like empty wells, a life is more than some people get. The bell above the door just chimed. It's 2:47 a.m. Time to get back to work. Story 4. The elevator that skipped my floor every time. The thing about living on a floor that doesn't exist is that nobody believes you when you try to explain it. They look at you like you're confused, like you miscounted, like you don't know the difference between 7 and 8. But I know where I lived, I know what floor I was on, and I know that elevator skipped it every single time, not because it was broken, but because it knew something I didn't. I moved into the Alderman building in March. It was one of those old pre-war apartment complexes downtown, 15 floors of faded grandeur, brass fixtures gone green with age, marble floors in the lobby that had been walked smooth by a century of feet. The kind of place that used to be luxurious and now just felt heavy, dense with history, dense with something else I couldn't name. The apartment was on the 7th floor, 7C. I remember the realtor pointing it out on the floor plan, remember signing the lease with that number printed clearly at the top. 7th floor, Unit C, 1,200 square feet of hardwood and high ceilings and windows that looked out over the city. I was 34, freshly divorced, starting over in a new city where nobody knew my name. The apartment felt like a promise, a blank slate, the kind of place where I could figure out who I was when I wasn't somebody's husband anymore. The first week was normal, unpacking boxes, learning the layout of the neighborhood, figuring out which takeout places delivered and which grocery stores were walkable. The building was quiet. Most of my neighbors seemed to be older, the kind of people who kept to themselves. I'd nod at them in the hallway, and they'd nod back. Nobody tried to make conversation. That suited me fine. The elevator was old, but functional. One of those cage-style lifts, with the accordion gate you had to pull closed yourself. It rattled and groaned on the way up, and there was a moment around the 4th floor where it always seemed to hesitate, like it was thinking about whether to keep going. But it got me where I needed to go, so I didn't complain. It was maybe day 10 when I first noticed something wrong. I'd been out getting coffee, came back to the building, stepped into the elevator, pulled the gate closed, reached for the button panel. The buttons went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, no 7. I stood there, finger hovering, certain I was seeing it wrong. I counted again, counted a third time. The buttons were old brass, worn smooth from decades of use, but the numbers were clear. 1 through 6, then 8. No gap where a 7 should be, no missing button, no blank space. Just a sequence that skipped from 6 to 8, like 7 had never existed. I pressed 8. The elevator groaned its way up, and I got off 1 floor above mine. Took the stairs down. My door was right where it should be. 7C, brass numbers screwed into the wood. I unlocked it, walked in, stood in my living room, and tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. The next morning, I checked the elevator again. Same thing, no 7. I pressed 6 and walked up, pressed 8 and walked down. My floor was there. I was standing on it, but the elevator didn't acknowledge it existed. I asked the super about it. Nice guy, maybe 60, named Harold. He looked at me with this expression I couldn't read when I mentioned the missing button. Old building, he said. Things get weird. I'll put in a work order. But the 7th floor exists, right? I asked. I live there, apartment 7C. Harold just nodded slowly. Sure, I'll look into it. He didn't look into it. Or if he did, nothing changed. The button stayed missing. The elevator kept skipping my floor, going straight from 6 to 8 without even a hesitation. I started taking the stairs more often, telling myself it was good exercise, telling myself the elevator was just old and broken and nobody cared enough to fix it. But there was this feeling I couldn't shake, this sense that something was off in a way that went deeper than a missing button. My neighbors on 6 and 8. I tried talking to them once, asked if they'd noticed the elevator issue. The woman on 6, Mrs. Huang, smiled politely and said she always took the stairs. The man on 8, a younger guy whose name I never learned, just shrugged and said he'd never really thought about it. Neither of them mentioned the 7th floor. Neither of them acknowledged that there was an entire level of the building between them. It was late March when I decided to look at the building directory in the lobby. The brass plaque by the mailboxes listing every unit. Floors 1 through 6, floor 8 through 15, no 7th floor, no 7A, 7B, 7C, 7D, nothing. I was standing in an apartment that didn't appear on any official record of the building, living on a floor that the elevator wouldn't stop at, that my neighbors wouldn't talk about, that didn't exist on the directory in the lobby. That night, I lay in bed listening to the rain against my windows and tried to convince myself there was a rational explanation. Some bureaucratic error, some quirk of old buildings and outdated paperwork. But I kept thinking about the way Harold had looked at me when I asked about the 7th floor. That flicker of something in his eyes before he'd nodded and changed the subject. Like he knew something. Like he was hoping I wouldn't figure it out. I pulled the covers up to my chin and stared at the ceiling, listening to the building settle around me. Somewhere far below, I heard the elevator groan to life. Heard it start its slow climb upward. It stopped on 6, then 8. I heard the doors open, close. Footsteps in the hallway above me. It never stopped on 7, not even in the middle of the night, when I was the only one who should have been calling it. That was when I started to wonder if I was supposed to be here at all. I tried to find my lease, dug through the boxes I still hadn't unpacked, searched every folder on my laptop, checked my email for the digital copy the realtor had sent. Nothing. The lease was gone. Every document related to my apartment, the application, the credit check approval, the move-in inspection form, all of it had vanished. My email showed a gap in my inbox from February, the month I'd been apartment hunting. Messages before, messages after, nothing in between. I called the realtor, got a recording saying the number was no longer in service, searched for her name online and found nothing. No LinkedIn, no website, no record that she'd ever existed. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Identity theft, maybe. Some kind of elaborate scam I hadn't figured out yet. I drove to the city records office and asked to see the building permits for the Alderman building. The clerk was helpful, pulled the files without question. 15 floors, basement through 14, plus the penthouse level. No 7th floor on any of the architectural drawings. No 7th floor on the original permits from 1923. The building had been constructed, according to every official document, without a floor between 6 and 8. Some old building skipped 13, the clerk said when she saw my face. Superstition. Maybe this one skipped 7. But that wasn't right. The building had floors 1 through 15. I'd seen the buttons. I'd ridden the elevator. They hadn't skipped 7 in the numbering. They'd just pretended it wasn't there. I went back to the Alderman that night and counted windows from the street. 6 rows, then a gap, not a big one, but visible if you knew to look for it. Dark windows where no light ever seemed to shine. Then 8 more rows above. The 7th floor existed. The building knew it. The city just didn't. I started paying closer attention to my floor after that. Walking the hallway, really looking at it for the first time. There were 4 units, 7A, 7B, 7C, 7D. All 4 doors looked identical. Same dark wood, same brass numbers, same old-fashioned mail slots. But I'd never seen anyone come out of the other apartments, never heard footsteps in the hall, never heard music or television or conversation through the walls. The building was old, sure, but not that well insulated. I should have heard something. I knocked on 7A one evening, waited, knocked again, nothing. Tried 7B, same result. 7D was at the end of the hall, farthest from the stairs. I stood in front of that door for a long time before knocking. Something about it felt different. The brass numbers were duller than the others, like they hadn't been polished in decades. The mail slot was rusted shut. I knocked. The sound was wrong. muffled, like the door was thicker than it should be, or like there was something on the other side absorbing the noise. No answer, no movement, no sign that anyone had lived there in years. But when I turned to walk away, I heard something, faint, barely audible. A sound from behind the door of 7D, breathing, slow and wet, like someone standing just on the other side, listening to me the way I was listening to them. I walked back to my apartment very quickly, locked the door, didn't go back into the hallway for 3 days. The next week, I started noticing changes in my apartment. Small things at first. A coffee mug I didn't recognize in my cabinet, a book on my shelf I'd never bought, some old hardcover with a water-damaged spine and no title on the cover. A photograph tucked behind my bathroom mirror that showed a woman I'd never seen, standing in what looked like my living room, smiling at the camera. The photograph was black and white, the edges yellowed with age. The woman was young, maybe late 20s, wearing clothes from another decade. Behind her, I could see my windows, my walls, my hardwood floors. But the furniture was different, the light was different, everything was the same apartment, but from another time. I flipped the photograph over. On the back, in faded pencil, Margaret, 7C, 1956. Someone had lived here before me. 68 years ago, in this apartment that didn't exist, on this floor that wasn't on any record, someone had smiled for a camera and written her name on the back. I went through my apartment with new eyes, opened every drawer, checked every closet, looked in places I hadn't bothered to explore since moving in. In the back of my bedroom closet, behind a loose panel I'd never noticed, I found a box, old cardboard, falling apart at the corners. Inside, more photographs, dozens of them. Different people across different decades, men, women, young, old. All of them posed in the same apartment, my apartment, all of them smiling. All of them with names and dates written on the back. Thomas, 7C, 1931. Ruth, 7C, 1947. Margaret, 7C, 1956. James, 7C, 1968. David, 7C, 1984. Susan, 7C, 2003. A line of tenants stretching back almost 100 years, all living in an apartment that didn't exist, all captured in photographs that had been hidden in a wall. At the bottom of the box, I found one more photo, different from the others. No person in the frame, just the empty apartment, my apartment. The angle was from the doorway, looking in toward the windows. But there was something wrong with the light, something wrong with the shadows. And in the corner, barely visible, a shape that might have been a person standing just out of frame. I turned it over. The back was blank except for one word, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Soon. The rain started falling outside. I sat there on my bedroom floor surrounded by photographs of people who had lived where I was living, and I wondered where they all were now. I wondered if anyone had ever come looking for them. I searched for them, every name, every date. I spent hours online trying to find any trace of the people in those photographs. Thomas, 1931, no records. Ruth, 1947, nothing. Margaret, 1956. David, 1984. Susan, 2003. Name after name, decade after decade, and not a single obituary, not a single news article, not a single mention of anyone by those names who had ever lived in this city. They hadn't just left the apartment, they'd been erased, like they'd never existed at all. I started sleeping badly, lying awake at night, listening to the building breathe around me. And it did breathe. I'm sure of that now. Not the normal sounds of an old building settling. Something else. A rhythm. An inhale and exhale that I could feel in my chest if I lay still enough. The dreams started around then. I'd find myself walking through the 7th floor hallway, but it was longer than it should be. Stretched out, the doors repeating endlessly on either side. 7A, 7B, 7C, 7D, then 7A again, 7B, 7C, 7D. Over and over, the same 4 doors extending into darkness. And at the end of the hall, always at the end, a door I didn't recognize. Black, no number, no mail slot. Just smooth, featureless wood that seemed to drink the light. I'd walk toward it, unable to stop myself. Each step took longer than it should. The air grew thick, hard to breathe, and just as I reached for the handle, I'd wake up, heart pounding, sheets soaked with sweat. The sound of the elevator groaning somewhere below, passing my floor without stopping. I decided to leave, packed a bag, called in sick to work, told myself I'd find a hotel for a few nights and figure things out from a distance. I couldn't think clearly here, couldn't separate reality from whatever was happening in this place. I took the stairs down, didn't trust the elevator, hadn't trusted it for weeks. 6 flights to the lobby, my footsteps echoing in the stairwell, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The lobby was empty, Harold's desk abandoned, the brass fixtures gleaming dully under the chandeliers. I walked toward the front door, bag over my shoulder, keys in my hand. The door wouldn't open. Not locked, I checked. The deadbolt was disengaged, the handle turned freely, but the door itself wouldn't move, like it had been sealed from the outside, like something was holding it shut. I tried the service entrance, same thing. The emergency exit by the stairs, same. Every door on the ground floor, sealed tight, immovable, trapping me inside. I told myself not to panic. Called 911 from my cell phone. The line rang and rang and rang. No answer, no voicemail, just endless ringing until I hung up. I tried calling my sister, my parents, my ex-wife, even though we hadn't spoken in months. Every call went to dead air. Not even a dial tone, just silence, like the signal was being swallowed before it could leave the building. I was trapped. That night, I sat in the lobby and watched the elevator. I don't know why. Some part of me thought that if I understood how this place worked, I might find a way out. The elevator moved on its own. I'd noticed that before, heard it groaning through the walls at odd hours, but I'd never watched it. Now I did. The brass needle above the doors tracking its progress. Basement. 2. 4. 6. It stopped on 6 for a long moment, then jumped to 8, never passing through 7, even though 7 was right there between them. But then something changed. The needle quivered, dropped back to 6, quivered again. And slowly, impossibly, it moved to a position between 6 and 8, a position that shouldn't have existed on the dial, a position that corresponded to a floor the building refused to acknowledge. 7. The elevator had stopped on the 7th floor. I heard the doors open, that distant metallic screech I'd learned to recognize. Heard them close again. Heard footsteps, not in the lobby, not in the stairwell, but somewhere above me, walking the hallway of the 7th floor. My hallway. My floor. Someone else was up there. I didn't go up. Couldn't make myself move. Just sat there in the empty lobby, watching the needle, listening to those footsteps pace back and forth, for hours. When the sun came up, the doors worked again. I pushed through the front entrance and stepped onto the sidewalk, and the city was right there. Traffic and pedestrians and noise, the world going about its business like nothing was wrong. I walked 3 blocks before I stopped, turned around. The Alderman building looked normal from outside, 15 floors of faded brick and old windows. But I counted them again, the way I had before, looking for the dark gap between 6 and 8. It wasn't there anymore. The windows were evenly spaced. The 7th floor's dark glass was gone, replaced by lit windows matching all the others. Like it had never been different at all. I should have kept walking. Should have found a hotel, called a lawyer, done something rational. But I thought about the photographs in the box. All those people who had vanished. All those smiling faces from apartments that didn't exist. Someone had to know what happened to them. Someone had to have answers. I walked back into the building. The elevator was waiting for me. Gate open, lights on, like it knew I was coming. I stepped inside and looked at the buttons. There was a 7 now, brass, worn smooth, sitting exactly where it should have been all along, like it had always been there, like I'd imagined everything. I pressed it. The elevator shuddered, groaned, and began to climb. When it stopped on 7, the doors opened onto a hallway I didn't recognize. The hallway stretched in both directions, longer than any floor of the building should have been. The walls were papered in a faded floral pattern I'd never seen before, water-stained and peeling at the corners. The lights overhead flickered in an unsteady rhythm, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. And the doors, there were dozens of them, not 4, dozens, stretching as far as I could see in either direction. All of them identical, all of them numbered. 7A, 7B, 7C, 7D, 7E, 7F. The numbers kept climbing, the sequence endless, impossible. This wasn't my floor. This wasn't any floor that should exist in a 15-story building. The air was wrong, thick and stale, like it hadn't circulated in decades. It smelled like old paper and dust and something underneath. Something organic, something rotting. I stepped out of the elevator. The gate closed behind me with a clang that echoed down the infinite hallway. When I turned around, the elevator was already descending, the needle above the doors dropping toward the lobby, leaving me stranded. I was alone, or I thought I was. Then I heard the humming, soft at first, barely audible over the buzz of the flickering lights. A melody I almost recognized, something from childhood, something my grandmother used to sing. It was coming from somewhere down the hall, drifting toward me like smoke. I followed it. I don't know why. Some part of me needed to understand, needed to see what was at the end of this impossible corridor. My footsteps were muffled by the carpet, old, threadbare, the pattern worn away to nothing in a path down the center. A path, like someone had walked this route thousands of times. The doors I passed were all closed but not silent. From behind each one, I heard something. Breathing, movement, the creak of floorboards, the rustle of fabric, sounds of occupation, of life, coming from apartments that couldn't exist. I stopped at 7M. The humming was louder here, clearer. I pressed my ear to the door. The humming stopped. Silence. Perfect, complete silence. Even the flickering lights seemed to go still. Then a voice from the other side of the door, inches from my ear. You shouldn't be here yet. I stumbled backward, heart slamming against my ribs. The voice was a woman's, old, cracked, but somehow familiar, like I'd heard it before in a dream I couldn't remember. Who are you? I managed. A pause. Then, I'm Margaret, 7C, 1956. The photograph, the young woman smiling in my living room, 68 years ago. You're... I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't make my mouth form the words. I'm still here, she said. We're all still here. Everyone who ever lived on the 7th floor. Everyone the building took. My legs gave out. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the worn carpet, staring at the door of 7M, trying to process what she was saying. The building took you. It needs us. Her voice was patient, almost gentle. It's old, older than the walls they built around it. The 7th floor is where it keeps us, where it feeds. Feeds on what? Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. Time, memory, everything that makes you who you are. A soft thump against the door, like she was leaning against it. It takes you slowly, so slowly you don't notice at first. You just fade, become less, until there's nothing left but an echo thought about the photographs, all those smiling faces, all those people frozen in moments that had long since passed. How long have you been here? I don't know anymore. Time doesn't work the same way on this floor. It could have been years. Could have been days. She laughed softly, a terrible sound, hollow and distant. Could have been forever. I forced myself to stand. My legs felt weak, unreliable, but I needed to move, needed to find a way out. How do I leave? You don't. Simple. Final. Once the building shows you this floor, you're already part of it. You've been part of it since you signed the lease. But I didn't. I stopped. The lease I couldn't find. The documents that had vanished. The realtor who didn't exist. There was never a lease, was there? There's always a lease, Margaret said. You just don't remember signing it. None of us do. I ran. I don't know what I was looking for. The elevator, the stairs, any way back to the world I understood. But the hallway didn't end. It just kept going, doors upon doors, 7Q, 7R, 7S, the numbers climbing into the hundreds, the thousands, an infinity of apartments holding an infinity of prisoners. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs couldn't carry me anymore, until I collapsed against a door marked 7C. Not 7C at the beginning of the hall. A different 7C. Another 7C, impossibly far from where I'd started. The door swung open at my touch. Inside was my apartment, my furniture, my boxes still half unpacked, my windows looking out at a view of the city that seemed somehow flat, like a painting instead of a real place. And sitting on my couch, smiling at me the way Margaret had smiled in her photograph, was someone I recognized. Me. Another version of me. Older. Thinner. Eyes hollow and distant. The same emptiness I'd heard in Margaret's voice. You found it, he said. That's faster than most. Found what? He gestured around the room. My room. His room. Our room. The end. The beginning. It's all the same here. He leaned forward, and I saw that his edges were blurred, indistinct, like a photograph left in the sun too long. You're already fading. You just don't know it yet. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, and through my fingers, just for a moment, I could see the floor beneath them. Transparent, like I was becoming less solid, less real, like I was already starting to disappear. The other me, the faded one, watched me stare at my translucent hands with something like pity. It's faster once you know, he said. The building feeds on fear, on confusion, on that desperate need to understand. He smiled, and even his teeth looked worn down, eroded. You've been giving it a feast. How do I stop it? You don't. He stood up, and I could see the couch cushions through his body. You just accept. That's what I did. What all of us did eventually. It's easier when you stop fighting. I backed toward the door. I'm not accepting anything. There has to be a way out. There isn't. His voice was gentle, almost kind. I tried everything. We all did. Running doesn't help. The hallway just loops back on itself. The stairs lead nowhere. The windows don't open. And even if they did, there's nothing on the other side. Just gray, empty, nothing. The elevator brought you here. It won't take you back. Not now. Not ever. He walked toward me, his footsteps making no sound on the hardwood. You're part of the building now, part of the 7th floor. You have been since the moment you walked through the front door. I felt the wall against my back. Nowhere left to retreat. Why me? I whispered. Why any of us? The faded version of myself stopped, tilted his head, considering the question. Because you were looking for something. A fresh start, a new beginning, a place to hide from whatever life had done to you. His hollow eyes met mine. The building finds people like that. People who are already disappearing in their own way. People nobody will miss. Nobody will miss. I thought about my divorce. The way I'd cut ties with friends, with family, with everyone who knew me. The way I'd moved to a city where I was anonymous. The way I'd been slowly erasing myself for months before I ever signed a lease that didn't exist. The building hadn't trapped me. I'd walked into the trap willingly. How long do I have? Hard to say. Days, weeks, maybe longer. He gestured at himself, the fading edges, the translucent skin. I've been here for what feels like years, and I'm still not completely gone. The building takes its time. It likes to savor. Rain started falling outside. I could hear it against the windows, that soft, steady rhythm I'd fallen asleep to so many nights. But when I looked at the glass, the city beyond was wrong, flat, painted, a backdrop instead of a real place. What happens when I'm gone? Your photograph joins the others. Your name gets written on the back. And someone finds a new apartment listing for 7C, and the whole thing starts again. He sat back down on the couch, settling into the cushions like he belonged there, because he did. That's the cycle. That's what the building needs. A constant flow of people who are already halfway to forgotten. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. My hands were more transparent now. I could see the grain of the wood through my palms. The process was accelerating. The more I understood, the faster I faded. Is there anything left? I asked. After you disappear completely? I don't know. Nobody's ever come back to tell me. He laughed softly, that same hollow sound I'd heard from Margaret through the door. Maybe there's nothing. Maybe there's something else. Maybe we just become part of the walls, part of the foundation, part of whatever the building really is. I sat there for a long time. The rain kept falling. The other me sat on the couch, fading in and out of focus like a signal struggling to hold. Somewhere in the hallway outside, I heard footsteps. Other tenants, other prisoners, walking the endless corridor because there was nothing else to do. Eventually, I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the painted city, the fake sky, the nothing that surrounded this place. I could fight it. Could spend whatever time I had left running through hallways and pounding on doors and screaming for help that would never come. Could burn myself out in fear and desperation, feeding the building exactly what it wanted. Or I could accept it, sit in my apartment, look at my view, let the fading happen slowly, become another photograph in the box, another name written in pencil on the back, another story that no one would ever hear. I chose something else. I walked back into the hallway, found the elevator waiting for me. It was always waiting, I realized, watched me, anticipated me. I stepped inside and looked at the buttons. 15 floors, including 7. All of them lit, all of them accessible. I pressed 1, the lobby. The elevator groaned and began to descend. It stopped on 6, then on 5, then on 4, counting down like a heartbeat, like a countdown to something I couldn't name. When the doors opened on 1, the lobby was empty. Harold's desk, abandoned. The front door standing open, gray light spilling across the marble floor. I walked toward it. Each step was harder than the last, my legs heavy, my body resisting. The building didn't want to let me go. I could feel it pulling at me, trying to drag me back. I reached the threshold, looked out at the street. It was real. Cars passing, people walking, a city alive and moving and solid in a way the painted backdrop upstairs had never been. I stepped outside. The world didn't collapse. The building didn't swallow me. I stood on the sidewalk, rain falling on my face, and I breathed real air for the first time in what felt like forever. I didn't look back, didn't stop walking, Didn't slow down until I was 3 blocks away, then 5, then 10. I left everything behind. My clothes, my furniture, the life I'd tried to build in a place that was never meant for living. That was 6 months ago. I'm writing this from a motel room in another state. I pay cash. I don't stay anywhere longer than a week. I never take elevators anymore. Only stairs, always stairs. And I never, ever rent an apartment. Sometimes, late at night, I look at my hands, check to see if they're solid, check to see if I'm still here, still real, still whole. So far, so good. But sometimes, when the rain is falling and the world is quiet, I feel it. A pull, a whisper, something calling me back to a floor that doesn't exist in a building that's still hungry. And I wonder how long I can keep running before it finds me again, before I become another photograph in the box. Story 5. The feeling someone was lying under my bed. You know that feeling when you're a kid and you're absolutely certain there's something under your bed. That primal, bone-deep conviction that if you let your foot hang over the edge, something will grab it? I'm 23 years old, and I never outgrew it. Most people laugh when I tell them. They think it's cute, some leftover quirk from childhood that I never shook. They don't understand that it's not a quirk, it's not irrational. It's not some anxious habit I developed because I watched too many scary movies when I was young. There was always something under my bed, and 6 months ago, I finally saw it. I should back up. I grew up in a house in rural Pennsylvania, old farmhouse, 3 stories, the kind of place that had been in my family for generations. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, this small room with slanted ceilings and a window that looked out over the cornfields. I loved that room during the day, hated it at night. The feeling started when I was maybe 5 or 6. I'd be lying in bed, almost asleep, and suddenly I'd be wide awake with this absolute certainty that I wasn't alone. Not a ghost, not a monster in the closet, something under the bed, something lying directly beneath me, separated by nothing but a mattress and a few inches of air. I'd lie completely still, wouldn't move, wouldn't breathe, just stare at the ceiling and wait for morning, terrified that if I shifted my weight, if I made any sound at all, whatever was down there would know I was awake. My parents thought I was just a nervous kid. They bought me night lights, left the hallway door open, checked under the bed every night before tucking me in. They never found anything, of course. The space under my bed was always empty when they looked. But I knew. I knew something was there, even when I couldn't see it, even when there was no logical reason to believe it. The feeling followed me through childhood, through adolescence, through high school. I learned to cope with it. Pushed my bed against the wall so there was only one exposed side. Kept a flashlight on my nightstand. Developed this ritual where I'd leap from my doorway onto the mattress so my feet never touched the floor near the bed frame. When I left for college, I thought I'd finally escape it. New room, new bed, new beginning. For a few weeks, it worked. I slept soundly in my tiny dorm room, my roommate snoring softly across from me. No childhood fears creeping in. Then, one night, around 2 a.m., I woke up with that familiar feeling, that certainty. Something was under my bed, breathing in the darkness, waiting. I didn't sleep for the rest of the semester without a light on. After graduation, I got a job in the city, rented my first solo apartment, a studio on the 4th floor, small, but mine. I told myself this was finally my chance to prove the fear was irrational. New space, new life, nothing following me from that old farmhouse. I was wrong. The apartment was fine during the day, bright, airy, the sounds of traffic drifting up from the street below. I'd cook dinner in my tiny kitchen, watch TV on my second-hand couch, feel like a normal adult in a normal place. But at night, when the lights went off and the city quieted down, the feeling would come. That weight in my chest, that prickle at the back of my neck, that absolute, irrational, unshakable knowledge that something was lying under my bed, inches below my body, waiting for me to fall asleep. I started sleeping with the lights on again. Then I started staying up later, pushing off bedtime until exhaustion overcame fear. Then I started sleeping on the couch, telling myself the fold-out frame was too low to the ground for anything to fit beneath it. That worked for a while. A few months of restless couch sleep, my back aching, my neck stiff, but at least I wasn't lying in that bed with that feeling pressing down on me. Then the couch stopped being safe too. It happened on a Thursday. I remember because I'd had a long day at work and I was exhausted, more tired than I'd been in weeks. I crashed on the couch around 10, didn't even bother changing out of my work clothes, fell asleep instantly, woke up at 3:17 a.m. The apartment was dark except for the glow of the streetlights through my window. Everything was quiet, but I knew, the way I always knew, that I wasn't alone. I lay there, frozen, staring at the ceiling. The couch was low, maybe 8 inches off the ground. Nothing could fit under there, nothing human-sized anyway. But the feeling was stronger than it had ever been, closer, more immediate, like whatever had been under my bed for 18 years had finally figured out where I'd gone. I heard it breathe, soft, shallow, a sound so faint I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. But it came again and again, a rhythm that didn't match my own breathing, a pattern that was coming from somewhere below me. I didn't move, didn't scream, just lay there, heart slamming against my ribs, listening to something breathe in the 8 inches of space between the couch frame and the floor. It went on for hours, or maybe minutes. Time stops meaning anything when you're that afraid. I watched the window slowly brighten with dawn, watched the shadows retreat, listened as the breathing faded into silence. When the sun was fully up, I made myself look. I got off the couch, stood in the middle of my apartment, shaking. Then I crouched down, lifted the fabric skirt around the bottom of the couch frame, and looked underneath. Nothing. Empty. Just dust bunnies and a lost sock and the underside of cheap furniture. But there was something else. Something I hadn't noticed before. Scratches in the hardwood floor, long parallel lines like fingernails dragged across wood. They led from under the couch toward my bedroom, toward the bed I'd stopped sleeping in months ago. I followed them with my eyes, across the floor, through the doorway, disappearing into the shadows beneath my bed frame. And I understood, finally, that I hadn't been running from my fear. I'd been running from something real. I didn't look under the bed that morning, couldn't make myself do it. Instead, I grabbed my phone, my keys, my wallet, and I left. Went to a coffee shop 6 blocks away and sat there until my hands stopped shaking. The scratches could have been there when I moved in. That's what I told myself. Old apartment, old floors, previous tenants who moved furniture around. There was no reason to assume they had anything to do with the breathing I'd heard. No reason to connect them to 18 years of irrational fear. But I knew, the same way I'd always known. The scratches were new, and whatever made them was still in my apartment. I went back that afternoon when the sun was high and the streets were busy and daylight felt like protection. Made myself walk into the bedroom, made myself crouch down and look under the bed. Empty, dust, shadows, nothing that shouldn't be there, but the scratches continued under the bed frame, disappearing into the darkness at the far corner where the wall met the floor. I got my phone flashlight and angled it underneath, trying to see where they led. They stopped at the wall, but the wall, there was something wrong with the wall. A thin crack running along the baseboard, barely visible, like the plaster had shifted, like something had pushed through from the other side. I told myself it was settling. Old building, foundation issues, nothing unusual. I told myself I'd mention it to the super and he'd explain it was perfectly normal. I didn't mention it to anyone. That night, I slept at a friend's place. Told her I was having my apartment fumigated, that I'd seen roaches. She didn't question it. People expect roaches in the city. When I came back the next day, the crack in the wall was bigger, not by much, maybe an inch wider, an inch longer. But I'd looked at it closely enough to know. Something had changed while I was gone. something had been moving. I started documenting everything, took photos of the crack, the scratches, measured them with a tape measure, wrote down the dimensions in a notebook I kept in my purse. If something was happening, I wanted proof. I wanted to know I wasn't losing my mind. For 3 days, nothing changed. The crack stayed the same size. The scratches didn't multiply. I started sleeping in the bed again, telling myself I'd been stupid, paranoid, letting childhood fears control my adult life. Then I woke up on the 4th night with the feeling. It was 2:48 a.m. Rain was falling outside, pattering against my window in that soft, steady rhythm I usually found comforting. But there was nothing comforting about this. The weight in my chest was crushing. The certainty was absolute. Something was under my bed, right now, inches below me. I didn't breathe, didn't move, just lay there with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, every muscle locked in place. And then I heard it, that same soft breathing from the couch, shallow, rhythmic, coming from directly beneath my mattress. But this time, there was something else. Movement. A shifting sound, like fabric sliding against wood, like something repositioning itself in a space too small for comfort. Then pressure. A slight, almost imperceptible pressure against the underside of my mattress, like a hand pressing up, like something testing the barrier between us. I stopped breathing entirely. My vision went spotty at the edges. I was going to pass out or scream or die. I didn't know which. The pressure released. The breathing continued. Slow, patient. It knew I was awake. I was certain of that. It knew, and it was waiting. I don't know how long I lay there. Hours, maybe. Long enough for the rain to stop and the first gray light of dawn to creep through my window. Long enough for the breathing to fade, for the presence to withdraw, for that crushing weight in my chest to finally ease. When I finally moved, a twitch of my fingers, then my hand, then slowly sitting up, my whole body was cramped from holding still so long. My neck ached, my back screamed, but I was alive. I looked at the floor beside my bed. More scratches, fresh ones, pale against the aged wood. They led from under the bed toward the corner, toward the crack in the wall that was now 3 inches wide. 3 inches, wide enough to fit fingers through. I grabbed my measuring tape with shaking hands, checked my notebook. 2 days ago, the crack had been 1/2 inch. Now it was 3. Something was widening it. Something was making room. I called my landlord that morning, told him there was structural damage in my bedroom, that the wall was cracking, that I was worried about the building's foundation. He said he'd send someone to look at it. Nobody came. I called again the next day, left a voicemail, then another, then an email. No response. I went down to the super's office in the basement, knocked on the door. Nobody answered, but I could hear movement inside, shuffling footsteps, the creak of a chair. "Hello?" I called. "I need someone to look at my apartment. There's something wrong with my wall." The movement stopped. Silence. Then, from the other side of the door, so quiet I almost missed it. "Don't let it out." I stood there, frozen, waiting for more. But there was nothing. Just silence, and the distant drip of water from somewhere in the basement, and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I went back to my apartment, stood in the bedroom doorway, looking at the crack in the wall. It was wider now, 4 inches, maybe 5. And in the darkness behind it, I thought I saw something move. Something that had been waiting a very, very long time. I should have left, should have packed a bag and walked out and never looked back. But I needed to understand. After 18 years of feeling crazy, of being told my fears were irrational, I needed to know what was real. I started with the building, went to the public library, dug through records, found everything I could about the property. The apartment complex had been built in 1962, but the land had a longer history. Before the building, there'd been a row of tenements. Before that, in the late 1800s, a boarding house. The boarding house caught my attention. There were newspaper clippings from 1891, a fire that killed 17 residents, most of them immigrants with no family to claim them. The bodies had been buried in a mass grave somewhere on the property. When they dug the foundation for the tenements in 1924, they'd reportedly found bones. Nobody knew what happened to them. The records just stopped mentioning it. I kept digging, found a blog post from someone who'd lived in my building in the early 2000s. She described the same thing I was experiencing. The feeling of being watched at night, sounds coming from the walls, scratches appearing on her floors. She'd moved out after 3 months. Her final post said she still felt like something was following her. The comments were full of similar stories. Residents from different decades, different apartments, all describing the same sensation. Something under the bed, something in the walls, something that waited. One comment stood out. It was from 2015, posted by someone who claimed to be a former maintenance worker for the building. He wrote, "There's a space behind the walls in some units, not on any blueprints. We found it by accident in '98 when we were doing renovations. Goes down into the foundation, maybe deeper. We sealed it up and never talked about it. Some things shouldn't be opened." I read that comment over and over, trying to convince myself it was fiction, some bored internet troll making up stories. But I thought about the crack in my wall, the way it kept growing, the darkness I'd glimpsed behind it. That night, I didn't sleep in the apartment. Checked into a cheap motel 3 miles away, paid cash, told myself I just needed time to think. But even there, in a room I'd never been in before, I felt it. That weight, that certainty. Fainter than at home, but present. It was still connected to me. Distance didn't matter anymore. I went back the next morning. The crack was 8 inches wide now, wide enough to see into. I got my phone flashlight and crouched down, angling the beam through the gap. The space behind the wall was bigger than it should have been. Not just a gap between studs, an actual void stretching back into darkness that my flashlight couldn't penetrate. The walls were rough stone, not drywall. Old stone, foundation stone. And on the floor of the void, just at the edge of my light's reach, I saw scratches, dozens of them, hundreds, covering every surface, layered on top of each other like something had been clawing at the walls for decades, for longer than decades. I pulled back, gasping, and that's when I heard it. Not breathing this time. A voice, faint, barely a whisper coming from the crack in the wall. "You came back." I scrambled away, knocking into my nightstand, sending the lamp crashing to the floor. My back hit the far wall and I stood there shaking, staring at that crack. "You always come back." The voice was dry, rasping, like it hadn't been used in a very long time. "All of you, every time." "What are you?" My voice came out in a croak. Silence. Then that soft, wet breathing resumed. Closer now. Like something was pressing against the other side of the wall, listening. "I'm what lives underneath, what waits in the dark, what your grandmother knew about, and her grandmother before her. My grandmother. The farmhouse where I grew up. The bedroom with the slanted ceilings and the feeling that had haunted me since childhood." "That's impossible," I whispered. "That house is 300 miles away." "Distance doesn't matter." The voice sounded almost amused. "You carry the door with you. You always have. The women in your family have been opening doors for us for generations." I thought about my mother, how she'd always slept with the lights on, how she'd never talked about it, how she'd brushed off my childhood fears with a little too much conviction. I thought about my grandmother, who'd died when I was 7, who'd always seemed afraid of something she'd never name. "What do you want?" The breathing changed, became faster, excited. "We want through. The crack is almost wide enough now. It just needs a little more fear." A little more time. A pause. A little more of you. I felt it then. A tugging sensation in my chest, like something was pulling at the core of me, like I was being drained through an invisible wound. Every night you lie awake, you make the door bigger. Every moment of terror feeds us. We've been patient. We've waited so long. The voice dropped to a whisper. And now you're finally going to let us out. The crack in the wall split another inch. I heard plaster crumbling, falling into the void. I ran. Out of the bedroom, out of the apartment, down 4 flights of stairs and into the street. I didn't stop until I was blocks away, gasping for air, my heart threatening to explode. But even standing in the middle of the sidewalk, surrounded by strangers and traffic and the noise of the living world, I could feel it. The door inside me, and something on the other side, pushing to get through. I called my mother from a park bench, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone twice. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Honey? What's wrong?" "I need you to tell me the truth." My voice sounded strange, thin and far away. About the house, about Grandma, about what's been under my bed my whole life. Silence. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "Mom? How bad is it?" Her voice had changed, flattened into something careful, controlled. The crack, how wide? She knew. She'd always known. "Almost a foot," I said. "It's talking to me now. It says I'm opening a door. It says the women in our family have been doing this for generations." I heard her exhale, a long, shaky breath that told me everything I needed to know. "I should have warned you." Her words came out thick, reluctant. I hoped it would skip you. It skipped my sister. I thought maybe if you never knew, if you just ignored it hard enough, it would leave you alone." "What is it?" "I don't know what it is. Nobody does. My mother called it the underneath. Her mother called it something else." A pause. "It attaches to certain bloodlines, follows them, feeds on them. The fear we feel, it's not a symptom, it's a harvest. Every night we lie awake in terror, we give it a little more, make it a little stronger." I thought about all those sleepless nights, 18 years of lying rigid in the darkness, heart pounding, feeding something I couldn't see. How do I stop it? "You can't stop it. You can only—" She broke off. I heard her crying, soft and muffled, like she was pressing her hand over the phone. "Mom, tell me." "You have to starve it, refuse to be afraid. Close the door by not feeding it anymore." Her voice cracked. My mother couldn't do it. Neither could hers. That's why it's so strong now. Generations of fear, all building up, all pushing at the walls. And if I can't stop being afraid, silence. That was answer enough. I hung up, sat on that park bench until the sun started to set, watching people walk their dogs. Normal people with normal lives who had never felt something breathing beneath their mattress. Then I went back to my apartment. The crack was wider, almost 18 inches now, a gash in the wall that pulsed with darkness. I could feel the cold coming from it, a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Something ancient, something hungry. "You came back." The voice sounded stronger now, clearer. "I knew you would." I didn't respond, just stood in the doorway, looking at the crack, feeling my heart try to crawl up my throat. "You're afraid?" It sounded pleased. "Good. Your fear tastes like your grandmother's. Sweet, rich. All those years of nightmares. We've been feeding on your family for so long." I thought about what my mother said. Starve it. Refuse to be afraid. Close the door. Easier said than done when you're staring at a hole in reality that whispers your grandmother's name. But I was tired. Tired of running. Tired of sleeping on couches and in motels. Tired of being a prisoner to something I couldn't fight. I'd spent my whole life afraid. Maybe it was time to try something else. I walked into the bedroom. "What are you doing?" The voice sounded uncertain now, less confident. I sat down on the bed, right in the middle, directly over the spot where I'd felt the pressure pushing up, where I'd heard the breathing all those nights. "I'm going to sleep," I said. "You can't. You're terrified. I can taste it." I was terrified. My whole body was screaming at me to run, to flee, to get as far away from this room as possible. But I forced myself to lie down, forced myself to close my eyes. "It won't work." The voice was angry now. "You can't just decide not to be afraid. Fear doesn't work like that." Maybe it didn't, but something else did. Exhaustion. I was so tired, bone deep, soul deep tired, that even the fear couldn't keep me awake. I felt it pulling at me, trying to trigger that primal response, but my body had nothing left to give. I fell asleep, and I dreamed. In the dream, I was under the bed. Not on top of it, underneath, in that cramped, dark space I'd imagined my whole life. But I wasn't afraid. I was just there, looking up at the mattress above me, the slats of the bed frame, the ordinary architecture of something I'd turned into a monster. There was nothing else under the bed. No creature, no presence. Just me, lying in the dust, realizing how small the space really was. Then I heard breathing, but it wasn't coming from beside me. It was coming from above, from the bed, from me, the other me, the sleeping me, the me who had spent 18 years feeding something with my terror. I was the door. I'd always been the door, and the only way to close it was to stop believing there was something on the other side. I woke up at dawn. Pale light was streaming through my window, and the apartment was silent, completely silent. No breathing, no whispers, no presence pressing against the edge of my consciousness. I looked at the wall. The crack was gone. Not sealed, not covered, gone. Smooth plaster, unbroken, like it had never been there at all. I ran my hand over the surface, feeling nothing but wall. I checked under the bed. Empty. Checked the floor for scratches. Gone. Checked every corner of the apartment for any sign of what had happened. Nothing. I sat on the edge of my bed, shaking, trying to understand. Had I imagined all of it? Was I finally losing my mind? Then my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Did you feel that? Something changed. I slept through the night for the first time in 40 years." I stared at the message. Read it again. Again. Something had changed. Something had closed. But as I sat there in the morning light, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, that I'd won this battle. But the war was much, much longer. And somewhere in the back of my mind, quiet as a whisper, I heard it. Breathing. Faint. Patient. Waiting for me to be afraid again. That was 6 months ago. I still live in the same apartment. I know that sounds insane. Why would anyone stay in a place where something tried to claw its way through the walls? But leaving felt like running. And running, I'd learned, only made it stronger. So I stayed. Repainted the bedroom wall, rearranged the furniture, made the space feel like mine again. I sleep in the bed every night now, right in the middle, where I used to feel that pressure pushing up from below. Most nights, I sleep fine, deep, dreamless, the kind of rest I never had as a child. I wake up with the sun, drink my coffee, go to work, live a normal life. The kind of life I thought I'd never have. But some nights are harder. There are moments, usually around 3 a.m., when the city is quiet and the darkness feels thicker, when I feel it stirring, that familiar weight in my chest, that prickle at the back of my neck, the beginning of a fear I've carried since before I could name it. When that happens, I don't fight it. Don't try to push it away or pretend it isn't there. I just breathe, acknowledge it, let it exist without feeding it. I know you're there. I say out loud sometimes, but I'm not afraid of you, not anymore. Most nights, that's enough. The feeling fades, the weight lifts. I fall back asleep and wake up fine. Most nights. My mother and I talk more now. Really talk, in ways we never did when I was growing up. She told me everything. How it started for her when she was 4. How her mother had tried to warn her but couldn't find the words. How she'd spent her whole life managing a fear she thought would kill her. I made myself numb, she said once during a long phone call that stretched past midnight. That was my solution. Just turn off the part of me that felt things. It worked, kind of. The door stayed small, but I lost so much. Joy, connection, the ability to really be present with you and your father. Her voice cracked. I thought I was protecting you by not telling you. I was just passing down a different kind of damage. I don't blame her. How could I? She did what she thought was right with impossible knowledge and no good choices. We're both just trying to survive something that's been hunting our family for longer than anyone can remember. I've done research, tried to trace how far back this goes. Found records of my great-great-grandmother in Ireland, a woman named Bridget who was known in her village for her spells, nights when she'd scream and claw at the walls, swearing something was trying to come through. They called her mad. Put her in an asylum where she died at 32. She wasn't mad, she was just afraid, and nobody taught her how to stop. There are others I've discovered, not just my family, other bloodlines, other women, scattered across the world, all carrying the same door inside them. I found them in forums, in comment sections, in desperate midnight posts, asking if anyone else felt like something was living under their bed. I reach out when I can, tell them what I learned. Some of them listen. Some of them think I'm crazy. Some of them go quiet, and I never hear from them again. I try not to think about what that silence means. The thing is, it's not gone. I know that now. It's not something you defeat once and walk away from. It's something you manage, something you live with. A door you keep closed through sheer force of will every single day, knowing that the moment you slip, the moment you let the fear win, it'll start pushing through again. My grandmother couldn't do it. Her mother couldn't either. Generations of women in my family, all of them eaten alive by something they couldn't name and couldn't fight. But I can fight it. I fight it every night. And so far, I'm winning. I got a cat last month. This little orange tabby named Pumpkin who sleeps at the foot of my bed and purrs like a motor. Sometimes she stares at corners I can't see, her eyes tracking something invisible, her ears flattening against her head. When that happens, I pick her up, hold her close, remind myself that cats see things that aren't there all the time. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. Last week, I woke up at 3:17 a.m., the exact time I'd woken up that night on the couch when I first heard the breathing. Pumpkin was sitting at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, not at a corner, not at a shadow, at the space directly under the bed. I lay there for a long moment, heart beating slow and steady, refusing to let the fear take hold. Then I leaned over the edge and looked. Empty. Just dust and a few cat toys Pumpkin had batted underneath. But for just a second, just a fraction of a second, I thought I saw something else. A shape in the darkness. A suggestion of fingers pressed flat against the floor, like someone lying on their stomach and reaching toward me. Then I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. Sat up with Pumpkin in my lap, watching the sky lighten through my window, listening to the rain that had started falling sometime around 4. The door is still there, inside me. It will always be there, but I won't open it. Not for anything. Not ever. If you're reading this, if you've felt what I've felt, if you've spent your life afraid of something under your bed that everyone told you wasn't real, I need you to know something. It is real. It's always been real. And the only way to survive it is to stop being afraid. I know that sounds impossible. Believe me, I know. Fear isn't a choice. It's a reflex, a survival instinct, something buried so deep in your brain that you can't just decide to turn it off. But you can starve it, night by night, breath by breath. You can refuse to let it win. That's what I do now. That's what I'll do for the rest of my life. And every morning I wake up, still here, still whole, still me. That's another night I kept the door closed. That's another night I won. Check under your bed if you need to. There's nothing there, unless you believe there is.